My name is Hülya Balashik. I'd like to provide a couple of brief introductions. So right next to your name, you will see a rename option. So we would like you to uh, write your name and surname. Otherwise, you can also write using the chat function. You can also send private chats, or you can send a chat message to everyone. We also have that option. You will see the language options down below. If you would like to listen to the Turkish channel, you will need to select Korean. If you want to listen English, you need to choose the English channel. If you want to listen to Spanish, you'll need to stay on the Spanish channel. And if possible, please keep remaining in these channels, and please mute the original audio. If you cannot see the language options down below, you can either update the application or you can join the meeting using the phone. And I'd like to remind you that we are now live broadcasting on YouTube. We will be having an uninterrupted 240 minutes planned for this program, and we will be broadcasting live on YouTube for these 240 minutes. When the participants are speaking, we need to make sure that our microphones are off because background noises may distract the listeners. When you want to speak in the reactions part, there's a reaction part, you can raise your hand, and when you raise your hand, we can unmute you, and then we will allow you to unmute your microphone. Otherwise, we will also be recording in all channels. We will be recording all the conversations. So this is all that I wanted to inform you from a technical point of view. I'd like to say welcome to you all. And now we will have a short opening speech from the World Women's March Organization, Turkey. And because, as you know, due to the pandemic, the fifth international action was planned in a different way. However, due to the pandemic, due to the global pandemic, we decided to organize this event in the digital environment. Digitalization is actually a term that entered into our lives in the 2000s. And with the pandemic, to be frank, we did not know digitalization from a technical point of view, but then we suddenly found ourselves in the midst of digitalization. That's why we came together today. We have experts among us on digitalization, on what digitalization is, its impact on women, and we will receive a lot of information, and we will be more aware of the terms and the issue. And now in the part on introduction to digitalization, I'd like to leave the floor to Mariana. Mariana, are you here? Mariana, are you here?
I am. Can I ask you 2 minutes just so I can send a general... Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was asking if you can give me 2 minutes just so I can warn the other people who I don't see online here that we are starting. Just two minutes. Is it possible? Okay.
Of course, sure. So while we are waiting, Mariana, let me talk about Mariana and Ankita. Mariana is one of the members of the International Committee, Mariana Fernandez. She is representing Europe, and she is participating from Switzerland. So on digitalization, she will be providing us more clear information so that in the upcoming topics, in the upcoming headings, we will have a better grasp of the subject. So this will be a very good introduction to the topic. So now we're waiting for Mariana. Is Ankita here? Because
Ankita is
Mariana,
solving issues with interpretation. Uh, I don't know if she has. Ankita, have you solved? Okay. Oh, she cannot unmute herself.
okay, I will find Ankita and we need to ask her to unmute. Or can we make Ankita co-host and then solve this problem?
Hi, I think I have been unmuted now.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Ankita is from IT for Change from India. And now I'd like to leave the floor to Ankita. You have the floor.
Hi everyone. So nice to meet everyone virtually. And we are here to obviously talk about, as Julia has very nicely introduced the session, and I was facing issues with the interpretation at that time. I will go slow. So if there are any questions or if you're facing issues with the interpretation, you can type in the chat box. My colleague is also joining from India with me, Khala. She's also here. I would request her, can you please access her screen sharing rights so that she can share her screen? Uh, can you allow her screen sharing?
Okay, I'm trying to do that. She should be able to do it now.
Khala, can you do it now?
Hello. You can go. You can go now. You can speak now. I will go afterwards.
Can everyone see the screen? Okay, great. So hi, I'm going to introduce myself and my colleague and our organization, and I'm going to introduce about what we are going to talk about during the workshop and tomorrow. We thought of discussing about the digital rights and the feminist agenda, basically talking about how do we place the digital sphere and the digital debate within the feminist framework. I'm Ankita and my colleague Khala. We both work with IT for Change, which is an NGO which aims for society in which digital technologies contribute to human rights, social justice, and equity. Our research and advocacy in the areas of gender, development and democracy, education and internet governance, community informatics, and internet digital policies push the boundaries of existing vocabulary and practice, exploring new development and social change frameworks. Feminist network building is key to our work. So when we were discussing about the agenda for the workshop with the team, with the Turkey team, we were discussing about how it is important to discuss about the digital, especially now when we all see increasing existence, increasing presence of all of us on the digital, on the virtual platform. Education is moving on the virtual platform, health has moved on the virtual platform, our work is moving on the virtual platform. There is more advocacy, there is more network building, there is a need to discuss all of this in the digital space. But when we talk about all of that, the first word that comes to our mind is the pandemic. What is it that the pandemic is doing for all of us to sit on our seats and sit and think about how do we look at this from a gendered perspective? What are the fault lines that the pandemic has exposed? What the pandemic has done is it has starkly visibilized the underlying inequality and injustice of the global economic paradigm. The impact of any disaster is always gendered, and I'm sure we've always had a lot of conversations around it. These disasters, the pandemic, the other disasters that we face as a community, play out differently for men and women and gender non-conforming people. And so did the COVID pandemic. The intrusive technology which was being used in the name of contact tracing, containing the pandemic, etc., has essentially become tools of surveillance, which is increasing control over the bodies of the individuals, especially the marginalized sections. For example, the facial recognition. In our country, we had this app where we had to go online, register our phone numbers, give our address, and constantly keep updating, and it traced our locations. That really is a tool for surveillance which can turn extremely scary if given in the wrong hands, which might happen at any point in the future. So it is very, very important for us to understand what is the technology doing over here, what is the role that technology plays. Then the women have definitely experienced the double whammy of social isolation and increased burden of care work in their domestic spaces. Everybody was home. Children were home. Men were home. Everybody was inside the four walls of the house, where the woman was the caretaker for all of them. So there was this increasing need of providing care and fulfilling everyone else's needs, which was a skewed burden that laid on the shoulders of the women. And then the impact of the pandemic on the employment, on the jobs of the women and other marginalized sections. With the increased burden of care work, their jobs were the first to go, and the research shows that their jobs will be the last to return as well. And finally, we would like to obviously one important factor, one important outcome of the pandemic that we've all seen, the world around has seen and talked about and discussed and debated, and a lot of webinars have happened around it, what the UN Under Secretary General referred to as the shadow pandemic. In the domestic private spaces, there's been an increase of the level of violence against women during all of these months. The restricted movement and social isolation, which expanded to obviously contain the pandemic and the virus, left the women exposed to violence in the absence of a system that they could access, which had people and resources for their help. Globally, 243 million women aged between 15 to 49 have been subjected to sexual and or physical violence in the last 12 months, according to a UNDP report. So when we are talking about the pandemic and its gendered impact and looking at the cross-cutting intersection between the gender, between the pandemic and between the digital, it is very important for us as feminists to come together and visualize how do we see the post-pandemic world. And for that to happen, it is important for us to talk about the digital in two aspects. One is obviously the digital activism, which is something that we are going to be discussing over the course of the workshop. And the second, which we would like to put on the table, is activism for the digital. We hope to explain it better. But to begin with, the digital activism bit of it is obviously building solidarities, finding collaborations across feminist networks. Today's workshop is a brilliant example of that. So many feminists from so many different parts of the world coming together to discuss about digitalization and women is a brilliant example. So these networks to advance the feminist agenda is pertinent to the digital activism world. Women have appropriated the digital to forge collectivity, seek legitimacy, and create subversive spaces for nurturing a feminist politics. And the flux we are a witness to can be harnessed by agile feminist action into a productive space that can mark a departure from traditional norms that define social power. But then, for this to happen, we as feminists need to reclaim the historical knowledge and build an informed framework of analysis and action, which brings me to what we call activism for the digital. There is a need to invest in a feminist analysis of the digital. As feminists, what is our responsibility in making the internet align with the feminist values? As feminists, we need to go beyond just wanting certain ends. We need to build a critical analysis of the means as well. We need to be asking the right questions. Where is the data going? Who owns this data? Where is all the money that is generated from all this data going? What are the terms and conditions for women's participation on the digital platforms? Those are all the questions that we need to come together and think about. Because in the digital capitalism, patriarchy does not even try to strike gender bargains. And cyberspace is giving birth to and perpetuating a new masculine that terrorizes women if they dare to assert themselves in the public spheres. With this background, it is important then for all of us to come together and think about, as feminists, how do we start seeing the digital? How do we start debating the digital? How do we start appropriating the digital? And how do we start putting this digital in the framework of our feminist analysis? We would like to discuss this, debate this, take questions on this over the period of the next 2 days, and hope to discuss it in detail or during our session tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Over to Mariana now.
Thank you, Ankita. Can I just, Julia, can I just go? Okay. I am sorry, everyone. Okay.
Please go ahead, Mariana.
I'm sorry that we were solving technical problems with the recording in Spanish. So, but now everything is okay, I think, and we're good to go. First of all, I would like to thank the sisters from Turkey and from World March of Women in Turkey for organizing this workshop. This is a very crucial topic in which there is a lot of asymmetry of knowledge between the transnational corporations and the feminist grassroots movements. So I think this is a very crucial political training, and I hope that we will be able to reproduce it again in the future. So as Julia said, my name is Mariana. I am one of the coordinators of World March of Women in Europe. And from the 8th of March to the 17th of October of this year, the World March of Women is carrying out our 5th global action with the slogan, "We resist to live and we march to transform." After 20 years of grassroots anti-capitalist movements and resistance, we realized it would be very important for us this year to denounce the ways in which transnational corporations have become major actors of dispossession all over the world, but also major targets of struggle and resistance. And in this process of collective reflection, but also collective action, it became very clear for us that the digital sphere is one of the main stages in which global capitalism is reorganizing today. And for this reason, it is important for us to build a collective criticism to those companies, but also an agenda of struggles that is situated in feminism, anti-racism, and also in ecological practices to fight against transnational corporations in the digital economy. It's also important for us to come up with concrete anti-capitalist alternatives to the current way that the digital sphere is organized. And hopefully this workshop will be a first step in this sense. From the 2000s onwards, we have seen that the economic power of 5 major transnational corporations in the field of information and communication technology has increased a lot. These companies are Alphabet, who is another name for Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. Together, these companies control 80% more or less of the data that is recompiled, stored, and analyzed in the world. And the fact that a lot of data is produced in the global south, for instance, and that these big tech companies are majorly moved with transnational capital that originates from the global north and China sometimes, has led some people to affirm that there is a neo-colonial organization of data extraction nowadays, in the same way that mineral extraction is also neo-colonial. Another concerning element in this sense is also the free trade agreements that are now including more and more the issue of free flows of data that are harmful to the digital sovereignty of the people. And this is very concerning in a context where the ability to accumulate data has become very key in the global political economy. And I know that all of these discussions, they look very far away from our daily lives. It's almost as if they happen in another, in another world, but and we think sometimes that this does not concern us as citizens, as people, or as feminists. But this is actually not true. For instance, we are living in a moment of the so-called Uberization of labor, in which economic production, but also social reproduction relations are being completely transformed. And this is supported by a very dangerous marriage between technology and finance. So I don't want to get too much into the discussion about the labor impacts. I think that the next panel, Sophia's talk, will touch upon that, we'll discuss that. But just to briefly mention that I think it is important for us as anti-capitalist feminists to denounce two processes from the feminist perspective of labor. The first one is the proliferation of apps, of platforms and apps that hide the labor relation between apps and workers, and especially those apps that are dedicated to domestic work, care work, in which workers are mainly women, and the labor conditions in which they work are very precarious. And one example of that would be the platform app, care.com. These apps, they often reproduce racial and ethnical stereotypes and reinforce racist and colonial relations. I think tomorrow we will probably hear more about that, about how technology and artificial intelligence and all of that intersects with racism from the perspective of the Sisters of IT for Change. We will probably touch upon that in the workshop. But I just wanted to point out this element. The second element is the proliferation of the so-called electronic sweatshops, in which 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, women and men, majorly from the global south, work in very precarious conditions, executing monotonous, repetitive, and alienating tasks that are necessary to keep internet and artificial intelligence and everything that internet as we know it running smoothly in very precarious conditions. And this is called the micro work. So I also think that we need to pay very close attention to the ways in which social environmental conflicts are increasing due to the digitalization of the economy. And here, I think it's important to denounce two things. The first one is that a new wave of dispossession is going on right now because of the extraction of the minerals that are necessary for the material base that sustains communication and information technology. For instance, there are many minerals that are needed if we want to produce smartphones, if we want to produce screens, batteries. All of that requires materials and minerals. Examples of conflicts and social environmental dimension of the digitalization are the recent political events in Bolivia, in Latin America, for instance, in which the the democratically elected president Evo Morales, who was someone deeply committed to a transformative political project that included sovereignty over natural resources in relationship to imperialist powers, he was violently taken off presidents by a coup articulated and sponsored by the US government, the US-based technology companies, and Bolivia's right-wing elites to guarantee the access of these companies to the large lithium reserves of Bolivia, which are among the biggest reserves in the world. So another example would be the cases of conflict, violence against women, child labor that we find in the mines of extraction of cobalt, for instance, in Democratic Republic of Congo. And cobalt is a key mineral to electronic cars. So we see that there is a connection between these new dispossessions, these new conflicts, and the digitalization. And finally, I would like to emphasize that there is an important promotion of data extraction technology at grassroots level by international NGOs, international organizations committed to the agenda of capitalism that are selling to communities smart conservation, smart environmental protection, smart ecology, and that these are also being accompanied by mechanisms to promote the expansion of digital finance and also mechanisms to greenwash, to make certain supply chains look more ecological than they are. But at the same time, they increase the reach of big finance and big banks at rural territories where perhaps it was not the case before. And finally, there is also cases of use of automation to expand the reach of financialization of nature, of mechanisms such as RED Plus and others that we have been criticizing a lot. Before finishing, I would like just to connect these initiatives of the transnational companies to make use of technology to claim that their businesses are clean, ecological. It's important to connect this, what they are doing now, with a long history of corporate fake solutions to the problems they cause. For instance, corporate social responsibility, green economy, and all of that. And we need to connect that to a very dangerous tendency of appropriation of feminism by transnational companies as well, which sometimes is easier for us to grasp when it happens, for instance, in the fashion industry, where feminism is sold as empowerment and consumption. For instance, H&M t-shirt, this is what a feminist looks like. So to be a feminist, you buy a t-shirt that was produced in very problematic labor conditions. So this tentative to make dirty business look green is the same root, has the same root as the tentative to make heteropatriarchal capitalist businesses look feminist. And we need to be careful of that. In the digital sphere, this happens, for instance, in the discourses that associate women's empowerment to the work on apps or platforms, masking, of course, that these are precarious labor relations, or the promotion of, for instance, financial mechanisms that target women in rural communities using the notion of empowerment as if empowerment came through finance, digital finance. So due to all of that, feminist movements, as feminists and as anti-capitalist feminists, we need to start paying attention to the digital economy as a field of struggle against capitalism. We need to talk more about these topics with trade unions, with environmentalist movement, but also to build alliances with movements that are proposing and building alternative ways to organize the digital world. And this is already out there. This can range, for instance, from grassroots control over the elementary infrastructures of the digital, such as software, hardware, data centers, but also alternative architecture of platforms and apps based, for instance, on solidarity economy. So to finish, I think that more than ever, it is important to follow the feminist claim of placing life at the center and ask the feminist question, are the changes promoted by digitalization leading us towards a life that is worth living? And I believe that if the transnational companies keep on controlling the digital world, the answer will always be no. Thank you, and I am looking forward for this next days of knowledge and debate.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Mariana and Ankita delivered their speeches, and I think in terms of introduction to the digitalization in the first session, they drew a very good outline for us. And we listened to transnational companies from Mariana, and Ankita talked about the status of feminists in digitalism and what is the status of the, feminists in digitalism. Now, Ankita, at the very end of her speech, asks some questions. You can find the Turkish version of her questions in the chat part. And I want to remind you once again that we are at the question and answer part right now. So we want it to be as interactive as possible. Down below, there are reactions and you can raise your hand, ask your questions after raising your hand, or you can write your questions on the chat box, and you can see Ankita's questions if you roll up in the chat box. Let me also remind you that on the right top, there's gallery view as well. So from the gallery view, you can see all speakers. And you can also, if you want to see the speaker, you can also click on the speaker. Do we have any questions? Now, let me come to Ankita's question and read the question. She says we need to go beyond asking some things as feminists, and we need to make a critical analysis of tools. We need to ask correct questions. Where are the data going? Who is the owner of these data? And where's the money earned from these data go to? And what are the conditions and preconditions of women to join digital platforms? Yes, these were the questions that Ankita asked us.
Can I just say something?
Yes, Mariana?
I think that these are questions that maybe we will have more conditions of answering by the end of the workshop, hopefully, because they are not easy. But I think that they open an invitation for us to reflect precisely on the whole structure of the ways in which the digital sphere is organized, right? Right now, as we said, most of the data that is extracted from us is controlled by transnational companies who are not really committed to anything but their profits. And we see that there is an expansion of all this logic of extraction to many fields of our lives. It's not only in the, for instance, in the platforms of labor, but also data about nature's processes. So everything becomes something that can be transformed into information that will be put together from many places of the world, from many types of activities, and in that sense, give unprecedented power to the companies. So this puts us feminists in a very challenging situation. How do we face that? How do we uh, uh, counter that model? And how do we promote alternatives to that? And I think that is challenging. I don't know what, Ankita, what do you think in terms of what exists out there in terms of, let's say, alternative models of applications, solidarity economy applications, or free software initiatives. But I do think that more than ever, we are asked as feminists to go look for that and to articulate politically with those initiatives.
Yes, Mariana, I think whatever you're saying, first of all, you're taking away a lot of material from our presentation tomorrow. So you will not leave us with anything to discuss. But in any case, the reason that we asked those questions was because when we talk about digitalization and women, and we talk about placing the digital within the feminist framework, it is very important for us to start thinking about data as the unit on which this entire digital economy is building, and then understanding where is that data basically going, where is it coming from, who's working on that data, what are the systems that are processing that data, what are the companies, as you very nicely defined them, the big tech that we call, what are those companies doing with that data, and do we even know what sort of data we are giving to them? Because it is not just involuntary, it is not just unwarranted, this data is also absolutely hidden beneath multiple layers that is very difficult for us to even understand right now without the technical know-how of understanding how it is processed. So the idea is to say that when we are coming on the online platforms, when we are bringing the feminism to the online platform, when we are using the online platforms for our feminist activism, there is data that is being generated through all of those activities. So even keeping that in mind is very, very important. So I think we will explain this in our session tomorrow as well. But obviously, if you have questions around it, or if you want to discuss about it today, we can take that discussion forward. But the idea is to look at data as a resource, to look at data as, so I think you all must have come across multiple articles that have established data as oil in the new economy. So we saw how many wars were fought over oil. We saw what sort of a discriminatory, unequal economic system oil set up for us. And we as feminists, we are fighting that sort of a capitalist system. And now we see data taking the place of that sort of an economy and establishing a new digital economy. Then if we need to criticize it or develop an analysis of it, we start with the building block of that economy. So which is why we say that when we are discussing about this over the period of the workshop, we need to keep these questions in mind. Every time that we talk about any sort of digital debate or we discuss digital questions, we need to keep thinking about where is all of this going and where is it coming from and who's benefiting from this system. So that was the point of those questions.
Thank you, Ankita. Ankita and Mariana further elaborated the questions, and now it's clearer on our minds. And we can, by the end of the day or tomorrow, when we have more time, we can further discuss these questions. And Tika asks the floor right now. Tika, can you hear us? I think you're unmuted now, Tika Moreno.
Hi, I'm from Brazil. I'm Tika. I'm in two sites. I'm here listening in English in my phone, listening in Spanish when you speak Turkish because I use free software and Zoom is not compatible with translation. So I would like you to open my mic in Spanish so I can speak Spanish because I cannot process speak in English my intervention. Is it possible?
Can you check if it worked?
Yes. So
So you have selected the Spanish channel, right, Tika?
Tem que desativar o seu. Wait, I will deactivate your other because there's echo. Ah, no. Where is the... Can you say something again? Okay.
Okay, you can hear me. Great. Now, I set up this system in order to be able to see all of you on the screen, but I couldn't do it on my phone because I was using a free software. I actually will also take into account the political condition of my country, and I will also talk about the political condition of our country because we have the extreme right in the ruling in our country at the moment. And we will, of course, try to make a diagnosis of the situation. We have, of course, the free market rules on one hand, and all these economic issues, political issues are combined in our country at the moment. And it is all impacting the labor in our country. And all of these practices are, of course, all issues that Ankita mentioned are very important for us, of course, but as well as this, the privatization of public services is very important. When, of course, when it's time comes for the management of our data, and it happened really fast. There was this fast momentum. This was totally not transparent, and this is something that was done under the ruling of a far right party. And this also shows us that democracy is being segregated, and public services to be privatized require data to also be subject to this. Us Brazilians also, of course, have some public companies who are using our data. And regarding the software companies, there was a conflict because these companies were using free software, and of course these were made with public-private partnership, and private partnership came from USA companies. And this national policy in the country was, or let's say it became dependent on these transnational companies because they are closing in on our data. And when we are discussing digitalization, we should also consider this. I hope I was well spoken. Thank you, Tika. I think it was very well. It was a very good explanation and a good introduction. So now we will talk about digitalization and women labor. We have Sofia Skezera. She has a video. She's not with us, but she sent her video for us. Let me talk about Sofia a bit. Sofia is from Trieste Federal University, and she's a member of World Labor Organization. And we have a video of 25 minutes. So we will watch Sofia's video, and then we will proceed with other speakers. So let's stream Sofia's video. I think we have a problem with the audio. Can we solve this, or should we share the screen once again?
The digitalization of work has many impacts. We have seen through the pandemic, for example, home office or teleworking, as some people call it. The truth is that digitalization affects the work environments in many ways. It's not just one. We have AI in working places. We have AI replacing workers. We have home office and all the surveillance software that we have around, so we can control the workers' lives. And also we have platform workers. There are many different ways, but specifically this affects women. And it affects women not because uh, um, some people said that it helped us to coordinate our productive and reproductive work, and that home office is here to stay because it's convenient for women, because we can stay at home and take care of the kids while working. Some people actually say this. The truth is that whenever we see a new technology, whatever that is, the only thing that this technology will do is to translate into the digital world the inequalities that already exist in the reality. And this is something really important to notice. The technology doesn't solve problems by itself. The technology, the only thing that does is to put in a digital world the inequalities that we already have in the society. Some people say technology is gender neutral, and therefore it's going to help us reach equality in the next years to come, because whenever you sell a product online or you offer a service online, the person that is on the other side hiring doesn't know whether you're a man or a woman. The payment is the same for both of them. So actually technology is going to help us reach and make the gender pay gap even smaller. But that's not true. That's the same thing as to say that the washing machine is gender neutral. If a person will tell me that the washing machine is going to help us close the gender gap between men and women, because the washing machine doesn't know whether it's turned on by a man or a woman, it works just as fine, well, I will throw the washing machine to their faces because we cannot say that the washing machine is the great equalizer just because it's gender neutral. The truth is that on average, women are the ones who put the washing machine on the houses. So it's not actually helping closing the gap. It's just it's just exacerbating the gender gap. So with the new technologies, it happens exactly the same. And this can be seen in many ways. For example, in the pandemic, we have seen in the home office how this hit it really different, men and women. Actually, there was a survey done by a university in the United States. I don't recall which one, but that said that actually all the scientific work and all the scientific papers during the pandemic, all the scientific women just plumped all the scientific research that they have done, and actually in men it raised a lot. So you can see the difference. You can see that women, the scientific women that were mothers, that were on their houses, and they couldn't do more work in their research. They had to abandon their research throughout the pandemic because they had to take care of the kids, while men actually raised all their work and they actually published even more because they were at the home and they were quiet and they were really chilling and they could think a lot better, and they won a lot of hours in their daily life because they didn't have to travel to the office and stuff like that. So actually you can see these differences and how they translate into different arenas, into different environments. And with digitalization of work, this is not different. For example, when we talk about surveillance, when we talk about the fact that workers are being surveilled, well, actually, this is even worse for women, because women are being judged more. So when they, for example, when a boss has more information about what you do in the computer, about the pages that you are looking into, and about how many times you answer WhatsApp, or how many times you use the computer and what you use it for, actually women are being more judged than men. Because they talk a lot on WhatsApp, or they get distracted a lot and stuff like that. And this is something that is happening when they put surveillance softwares in the computers of the workers. But also, for example, about the right to disconnect. And this is something really important. Women are not used for the same purposes as men when we are contacted outside working hours. For some reason, the patriarchy assign us a new task, and that task is to be the agenda of the world. We are the ones scheduling meetings, we are the ones reminding things, we are the ones who have to tell our colleagues not to forget certain things. And that's something that easily can be solved by an email or an automatic automatic warning. You don't need a woman to remind you that. And so I think that to reach the right to disconnect in many countries, and by right to disconnect, I mean the right that has every worker not to be contacted by colleagues or your boss or anyone in their working environment out of working hours. That also means that women will not have, and this means also that women will not be contacted, they will not be reached out outside working hours. And this has a really lot of meanings in terms of gender equality. And why I say this? Because whenever a worker it's seen as a new ability, the fact that they reply mails or messages outside working hours. No, if I see that a person who replies messages even faster outside working hours, that's an ability to take into account, because it means that you have that you really feel the company, or that you're really into your working working partners and stuff. When we see that as an ability, who do you think that has more the ability to answer messages outside working hours? Well, probably men, because women are the ones taking care of the kids, they're the one cooking, and they're the ones who do the groceries. And so it's more likely that women will not have that extra ability. They will not have the ability to reply messages outside working hours. And so when it comes the time that we need a new raise, or they have to choose somebody on the team in order to get upgraded, well, probably will be the men. So the right to disconnect, meaning the right that every worker has not to be reached outside working hours, equalize the level playing field for everybody, because women are not left behind in this ability. The truth is that this doesn't have to be seen as an extra ability. It has to be seen as a disrespectful act that they have, because we lost the sovereignty over our time, over our free time. We have the right to do whatever we want to in our extra time, in our extra life, in our leisure time. And this is something that it's completely lost in the last couple of years. And also because of what I said, apparently the patriarchy assign us the task of being the agenda of the world. And so we need people to stop doing that. Just stop using women as your reminder, as your scheduling meetings agenda. That's something that can be easily done by automatic systems and by automatic warnings and by software. You don't need a woman to remind you the meetings or the paperwork or the schedules, the time, the deadlines. You don't need that. And so if we reach the right to disconnect, it's more likely that they will stop bothering women with specific tasks that can be easily solved otherwise. And this is something really important to just like not to have so many things on our mind. We are more likely to have the burnout syndrome than men because we have all these things that we need to remind from work, from personal life, from the lives of our kids, the things at school, the deadlines everywhere. And so we put even more stress into women's mind. And so we need to just stop doing that. So the right to disconnect is really important to reach it in every single country. Right now, the right to disconnect is only on some countries in Europe, like Germany, Italy, Spain, or France. In some parts of the world, like Canada and in India, I think there is also, in the Philippines. In Argentina, we have it for home office workers only, but we are working to reach it to every single worker, because some people think that the right to disconnect is the right that a person has not to reply messages, but that's not the case, because we have merged our personal life and our working life in these devices. And so I cannot just turn off my cell phone, because if I turn my cell phone off, that means that I won't be able to talk with my friends. And I want to keep talking with my friends after working hours. And some people say, okay, so don't reply the messages, but that's not the case also, because if I see the message, I'm being left out thinking that I have to reply all those messages next day in the morning. And so it doesn't ease all this extra work, the extra load of work that we have on our mind. We need to stop doing this because of gender equality, but also because of mental health, to be able to reach and to gain back the sovereignty over our leisure time or on our extra time. We have the right to do whatever we want with our non-working time. Also, it's a matter of gender equality, because we all know that the greatest problem that we have between men and women is the amount of time that we use on care working, on caring our family, on the care economy. And the truth is that even if the woman doesn't work, when a man comes home, he's more likely not to help with kids, not to contribute with the house chores if there's a boss that is constantly sending messages. So they have the excuse to say, no, I cannot shower the kids because I have to reply these emails, or I have to talk with my boss, or my colleagues are organizing something and I need to be there, and stuff like that. So if we put back the sovereignty over our extra time inside the homes, inside the houses, doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, we are going to help them organize the care work inside the house more swiftly, because it could happen that a man wants to help, but they have the excuse because they have to reply, because it's not seen properly if I don't reply to those messages. So the right to disconnect is essential for digitalization, is essential for gender equality, is essential for the years to come, so we divide the task between men and women more evenly. But also about platform workers, for example, this is something that it's really that I analyze a lot, because in platform workers, for example, they talk a lot about gender equality, because they say that the algorithm doesn't read if you're a man or a woman, they treat everybody the same. Well, I always said that an algorithm is actually, it works actually as a law, because they model the reality. They prescribe the reality. When an algorithm is telling you what to do and how to do it, they're actually working as a law. A law tells you what to do and how to do it. They tell you, no, you cannot kill somebody, no, you cannot do this, you have to pay taxes or whatever that law is about. Okay, the algorithm in AI does exactly the same. They say, they prescribe the reality. They tell you what to do and how to do it. And the law is not the same for everybody. The law, what it does or what it should be doing is, if you have a part of the society that has privilege and has another part of the society that doesn't, the law is trying to put again a level playing field for everybody. And so it will try to protect even more the rights of the part of the society that has less rights or that has less privilege, in order to put everybody on the same level playing field. So actually, when you want to regulate to reach gender equality, you need to put, for example, quotas for women or for transgender people to be able to reach um, um, a, a, a new job, or the pay gap, or whatever the thing that you want to solve. So actually, you need rules for that minority. You need specific rules for that minority, because otherwise, if the law is the same for everybody, it will just perpetuate the inequalities. With the algorithm, it's exactly the same. If you have an algorithm that treats everybody the same, what it will do is just to perpetuate the inequalities. So for example, if you are on a bike, just delivering a pizza, if the algorithm says, okay, the person who is more slow in delivering the pizza will be punished by the algorithm because you are you are more inefficient than the one who is faster. Who do you think is going to ride the bicycle faster? Well, probably a man will ride it faster because they're more strong. It's something that it's physical. And so if the algorithm treats everybody the same, well, it's just not favoring women. And this is something that we should start taking into account with all the algorithms in working environments, because algorithms are not something that it's only on platform workers. It's something that it's also, and it's starting slowly and step by step, getting into all working places, not just in platforms or on delivering platforms. They are in every place. And also there's the stereotypes. I mean, in platform workers, it's really it's something really interesting to see how many like platforms are masculinized or feminized depending on the type of job that they are doing. For example, if you are a cleaning service, well, probably your platform is almost 100% feminized. Or if you're a platform for care work or for nurses, probably you are almost all feminized. But if you are a platform for fixing the house or doing plumbing or even the delivery services, they are almost all masculinized. And this is something really that really gets your attention, because it's like the stereotypes in society, they just perpetuate in these platforms. And of course, the payments are different among platforms. And of course, the rights that they have are different among platforms. And this is really important also for trade unions to notice. Why? Because of course, Uber drivers and delivery food and services riders are the ones who are more noticed by the society, because you see them on the streets, because they are everywhere, and they are masculinized platforms. So if we start building trade unions to represent platform workers, we have a really big hazard of these unions being totally masculinized, or just representing men and with no women representation. This is a really important hazard because the platforms are not only about men. We have platforms of nurses, of people doing maintenance and cleaning the houses that are feminized, and these platforms are not even in the question of being in the eye of some trade unions. So this is something that it's really a hazard for the years to come in trade unions, in platform workers, that will only represent men and that will only have men representation inside their structure. And women have a lot to say there because we are the ones that are being left behind also in the platform economy. So saying all this, what I do mean is that digitalization, technology, or however you want to call it, it's not going to solve our problems unless we make it happen, unless governments really regulate about this. It's not going to solve our problems unless we use it to empower us to reach out for all those women that are being left inside their houses doing home office. In the pandemic, we experienced this massive experiment of home office. And the truth is that once a woman is being left inside the house and discovers the benefits of being inside the house and being able to reconcile productive and reproductive work, we have the hazard of that woman never wanting to leave the house again. And this is something really dangerous because that woman, it's again inside their house, it's exposed to domestic violence. It's really difficult to construct a political and an activist citizen out of that woman because it only reaches the messages that they are spread throughout media and the algorithms on social media. And so it's really difficult for that woman to realize that they are facing a domestic violence problem or that the political situation is not like the mainstream media is telling you, because you never leave the house and you never talk to other people and you don't realize what is happening outside. So for that, it's really important that we start making laws, home office laws in all the countries around the world who have the right to reverse the situation. So when the kids grow, when they leave the house, they have the right to say, okay, I want to get back to the office. I want to leave my house, because we cannot regulate against the will of the women if they want to stay inside the house. But it's important to leave the door open if they want to go outside again, because we had 1 century of feminism trying to get women out of the house, and now technology is getting us back inside the house. And they are putting us again this task of taking care of our kids and taking care of our families, like if it was something that it was specific for women. And certainly we do not want that for the next generations to come. We want equal distribution of tax in the house. We want networks of care economy that help us raise our children and take care of our elderly people, and we want women more active in working environments. We want leaders, we want women who get enrolled in political activism. We need that. And in order to get that, we need to solve the care economy and really the society to understand that this is a responsibility issue that needs to be distributed among everybody, not just women. We are not the ones who have all the responsibility of taking care of our children and of our elderly. And for that, we need more rights. We need the right to reverse home office. We need the right to have algorithms that promote gender equality. We need the right to disconnect We need the protection of data, the workers' data. So we are not blamed for what we do in the computer or what we see. We need a lot of rights. This is an agenda of rights. It's not an agenda of only activism. It is about activism. It is about talking with people and realizing all the hazards that the technology has, but it's also an agenda of governments and of rights to give solutions for women so we reach the gender equality in the next generations. Otherwise, it will just be another washing machine. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for listening to me. It's really hard because I am a working mother. I have 3 kids and I'm here in my house throughout this pandemic. So I'm sorry for not being there with you, but I just record this so you have the message. And thank you very, very much for wanting to hear all what I'm working here in Argentina about all these issues. Well, goodbye, and I hope you can think more of solutions about all what I said. Goodbye.
I'm sure Sophia will be watching us. We'd like to thank her very much. And I think she explained perfectly when she was talking. It felt as if from Argentina, from another part of the world, as if she is talking about our female workers, our colleagues at the workplace in Turkey. It's completely the same. It's not different at all because the time that we spent at home, I mean, including them in performance criteria and the fact that she talked about the disconnection right. I mean, as a terminology, we were not using this at all. I think it was very good that she underlined this, the right to disconnect, and we've learned it right now. And thanks once again, and our love to Argentina. Now, next, we have Sherife Ceylan. Sherife Ceylan is our women's Advisory and Solidarity Association, a member of our NGO, a volunteer member. And at the same time, Sherife Ceylan is now carrying out her master's education on gender. And in the past, she was also involved in some projects. Now we will listen to Sherife. Can you hear us? Yes, I can. Okay, I'd like to leave the floor to you now. Thank you very much. Now I will be sharing my screen. You can see it, right? Yes, we can see it. I think everybody can see it. First of all, while I have the floor from Sophia, I'd like to talk about for the women who have left behind those caring uh, responsibilities. And I'd like to now thank all women who have allocated their time for today, leaving behind their caring duties or their workplace duties. I'd like to talk about women's labor and digitalization. But before that, I'd like to say hello to all our sisters from the world. I'm a little bit excited, so I apologize for that. When I was thinking about digitalization and female labor, I actually thought as follows. Those structural problems of women are also seen in digitalization, and this problem that is revealed in digitalization is still ongoing. Uh, so first I will talk about women's labor, paid and unpaid women's labor, and then I will talk about how they're reflected in digitalization. Sherife, I apologize. I'd like to interrupt. Could you increase your audio? I think we cannot really hear you in a better way. Could you keep the microphone closer? So first of all, when we look at the discourse on unpaid women's labor, it was mentioned that it is actually outside the public sphere. However, feminist theoreticians mentioned that female labor also occurs as an unseen domestic work, and that is how it was more revealed. How this what kind of a women's labor is it? It is naturalized. I mean, it is an intrinsic labor, and because they are women, they take care of domestic work. For example, it's called a mother's intuition, or and the amount cannot be quantified. There's no limit to it, as it was discussed before, when the food is to be cooked or how much will be eaten. This doesn't happen in certain quantities or amounts, and it doesn't have any thing that is paid in return. And because it's not concrete, it's not visible, and domestic work is not considered to be economic. It's non-economic. How is it non-economic? For example, in the public sphere, a man that is working in return for some remuneration, and a woman who is working at home. And let's imagine that they are married, and the man is getting paid from the capital. It seems like he is doing that, but on the other hand, the woman is also feeding the capital. The unseen labor of the woman is feeding the capital. How does it happen? I mean, she is taking care of children, the elderly, in order to ensure the welfare of the family. If she had not done those, then the man, uh, the salary that the man is receiving from the capital would not be sufficient. I mean, he would also pay for these work that is provided by the woman. So the unseen labor of the woman is not actually being paid for, and when that is not paid for, it is actually feeding the capital. So in the debate for the paid women's labor, how do we consider this is the debate. And actually, participation in labor market is gender segregated. This is both horizontal separation and vertical separation. For example, there are gender-based occupations that belong to women and that belong to men. These are horizontal separation, but there's also a division in the same field of occupation based on the gender, and that is vertical division. I mean, the fact that there's a horizontal and vertical division in the workplace, and having the wages being paid based on, Sherife, I apologize, and I think there's a problem with your audio, and there could also be a connection problem, but you're presenting very well. We don't want to miss anything, and probably the participants don't want to miss anything. I'm sure that it was forgotten, but I was talking about the paid women's labor debate and unregistered employment, and work. The remuneration for partial work is also part-time work is also important. Kagidar had an evaluation of labor statistics of Turkstat. There are 3.2 million unregistered uh, female workers in Turkey, and the actual female unemployment rate is 32%. According to June 2020 Turkstat statistics of labor force, the unemployment rate for women in June was 14.5%, and as of June there were 1.41 million unemployed women in Turkey. However, Turkstat also had statistics on those who are not seeking jobs but they are ready to work, and that indicates that there are 2.5 such women as of June, and 614,000 do not have any hope to find a job, and the remaining 1.9 million are not seeking any jobs because they are housewives, students, or they are retired, or they are unable to work. So compared with this, what is the annual average individual income of women, and how much is it more than women? They are earning 31% more, and then if they are working in exchange for a certain remuneration, it is 21% more. Those that are self-employed are earning 77% more compared to women. DISC-R had an income gap report on 8th of September, International Equal Pay Day, and it has been reported that the average annual income of men is 31.4% higher than women. And in other words, women earn less than men by 1/3. So looking at digitalization and women's labor relationship, considering the interpreters are not really able to hear the speaker very well because her microphone is away from her mouth once again.
Sorry, Sheriff, can you approach your mic because we are not getting interpretation because interpreters cannot hear you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Well, digitalization tries to increase the productivity of labor and tries to decrease the value of labor, and the capitalist order is using digitalization and ensuring that. But before that, there's a director called Ken Loach, and there is a film, Sorry We Missed You, in 2019, directed by him. And this film actually shows us what we're talking about is more visible. In the opening sequence of the film, in order to find a job, the wife's car is sold by the father, and she is participating in a cargo network, and the woman is working as a labor providing a worker providing care for the ill, and he's using an instrument called tachograph, and that is actually following up the driver's movements, the speed, and the breaks that the driver takes. And the woman is not given any time, any breaks when she's taking care of the elderly, and her phone is simultaneously tracked on how fast she is, whether she's taking any breaks or not. And this is what is introduced by digitalization, simultaneous work tracking. But to what extent is it humanitarian, and to what extent is it presented with a gender-based perspective? Sherife, if you allow me, can I take the floor? I apologize. In the meantime, can you hear the interpretation? Shall we check, please? Because I think there was an audio problem before. Okay, Mariana says okay. I think everybody's okay now, right? Okay. All right. I apologize, Sherife, once again. Well, actually, if you watch this film right after our discussions, I think you better understand what we've been talking about. I wanted to go into the categories of digital labor, but these were already mentioned, so I will skip these. The strengths and opportunities of digitalization, yes, they can be available, and we will be talking about them later on. And now Öznur Karakaş, actually it says Karakuş, but it's actually Karakaş, had an article in Terabyte on digitalization and women's labor. So I'd like to talk about that article. According to research, 47% of workers are automized, and they are working in occupations that are possible to be automized, and there could be more than 5.1 million jobs that could be lost in administrative positions and office work. How will it be, how will all this change be reflected in women's employment and labor? And this question could be addressed in two aspects. The first one is that among the segments that are producing these technologies, which is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And in the ICT sectors, there's a low representation of women. This is called digital gender discrimination. And secondly, such change has disproportional impact on women's employment and women's labor. So here, once again, we see that in different occupations, when new professions are emerging, previous professions are also losing their value and they are vanishing. So this also, once again, shows us that the current professions of women are under threat. I'd like to also talk about digital gender discrimination. Nadia Bergman et al. Made a research on discourse analysis on digitalization and gender, and they indicate that the majority of the digitalization literature ignore women and gender issues, and in a limited number of examples which are on gender, the issue is focusing on the fact that women representation is very low in STEM and ICT areas, and in in STEM graduates, only 36% are women, but the employees of STEM are women by only 21%, and there's only 9% of women in the administrative positions. However, the main issue is to increase female representation in these areas, and that indicates that women are actually more appropriate for digitalization. This could be considered as a well-intentioned approach. However, digital transformation, integration without considering traditional roles. I mean, without creating female or male roles, we need to be involved in digitalization. I think this is a more important issue. Code Yazman, code writing and algorithm creation is actually important. So women's participation should always be questioned, and new structural problems should be prevented in advance. And again, gender-based job distribution in ICT Center. Başak Bozkurt and Aylin Akpınar researched about this, and I'd like to give some examples from this article. This article indicates that they used an in-depth interview and they talked to women working in the ICT sector when researching about the job distribution in gender-based. Name is M, age 32, coordinator, and they are saying that, I apologize, Sherife, can we do the following? Could you take off the headphones so that you will not have any problems in the microphone? Because I think it's better now. All right. In the ICT sector, based on gender-based job division, there was an article that was published. So based on that article, this research was carried out by carrying out in-depth interviews. They talked to some women working in the ICT sector, and I'd like to talk about some of the codes. Generally, there's this thing, and this is what they allow you to think. Women are not very good. I mean, they cannot write code very well. It cannot happen in this way, that cannot happen that way, and they actually get you to feel that way. And business solutions manager, age 38. What I feel is like men are positioned in things that are more like technical expertise. They know technical things that are better. For example, mainly architects are men. What we mean by architects is that we do not have a lot of technical architects. I mean, women are placed in more like showcase things, which are more soft things, and more like communication things, but men are considered to be more like powerful work. Or this is actually one of the stereotypical words that are being used. I mean, it is also very much apparent in coding as well. And here we still see that because we could not solve structural problems, we still have inequality. So what should be done in order to change these stereotypes stereotypical understandings. We need to be involved in digital transformation from the beginning. Women's digital skills should be improved, both when using technology and also in the advanced level technology area. Women should be trained. Female entrepreneurship in technology should be supported, and this should be done by developing policies both in public and private sphere. And finally, digital transformation should be cleansed of structural inequalities and should be woven in a feminist manner. Thank you very much. Sorry, I forgot to turn on my microphone. Thank you very much, Sherife. It was a very nice presentation. There was only a little bit of a problem with your audio. So now in the questions and answers session, if you would like to ask any questions to Sherife, you can react or you can write your questions on the chat box. Do you have any questions? Because we will have a 10-minute break, and if you have any questions, we'd like to get them asked and answered before that. Let's wait a little bit.
I have a comment if no one else has a comment, but I can wait to see if someone wants to speak before.
Yes, Mariana, there are no questions for now. You go ahead, please.
Okay. No, first of all, thank you, Sheriff, and also Sophia, who's not there, for your presentations. But I think both bring important things for us to bear in mind from this session. I liked when Sophia mentioned the danger of universalizing men's experience with platform work, because usually when we talk about platforms in the media, in everyday life, the first thing that comes to mind is transport platforms, for instance, which are the workers are mainly men. And there are some women who face a lot of barriers in these platforms, but sometimes we tend to take the experience of men with platform as universal. And I like when she says that trade unions need to pay attention to that in order not to reproduce, in order to create proper strategies to bring women who are in platform work to trade union politics. And it made me think when she mentioned about the centuries of, or the many years of feminist struggle to get women out, kind of out of the house, or at least, let's say, to politicize women's experience with the house as well. And now what is being sold to us as the solution to conciliate the issue of labor outside the house and the labor inside the house is home office, and how this is very fake, how this does not solve our problems. So I think this is something that we need to bear in mind as feminists, that home office or platform work or whatever the big tech companies are proposing now, it's not a solution in the terms of the feminists debate. Our claim is that care is equally shared, and actually that care is the center of how we organize society. And I also really liked when Sheriff showed how the debate about digitalization sometimes is focused only on women participating more in science and technology, and how it's actually much more complicated than that, and how automatization is already affecting, devaluating more women's labor than men's labor. So all of these are items that I think we need to bear in mind for building an agenda of claims and struggles around this topic.
Thank you, Mariana, for your contribution. We have one question on the chat box from Yashar. When you refer to platform, these are different branches of work. I'm just asking to understand it in a correct manner. When you refer to platform, you are referring to different branches of work. Is that right? And I'm asking to make sure I understand correctly. This is the question.
It's
Well, actually, it's a question to Sophia and you. What you refer to platform, it's
platform.
actually, she wants to make sure that she understood you correctly.
Platform, when we're talking about platform, we're talking about a specific way of organizing the like a company. It's a specific way, a platform. So for example, Uber is a platform, Grab is a platform. All of this delivery, for instance, when we see, I don't know if in Turkey this is a phenomena, but in other places, yes, when there is the people delivering food by bike with the bag with a slogan, they work for a platform. And usually a platform is something that combines a demand for something with the workers. They do this link between these two branches. But what we complain about is that they often there is often a labor relation there that is masked. The platforms, they claim that they are only mediators who put offer and demand in relationship, and it's not the case. They are very often behave like bosses, like a yes, like a working place. So that's what we are talking about when we talk about platforms. I don't know if Ankita wants to jump in as well.
Yeah, hi. So, no, actually, Mariana, you've explained it really well. Platform is a word that is specifically used to define the economy, which is run through the technological network building. So, there is a service provider, for example, Uber will connect customers who want a cab with the person who can provide you with the cab. So this is basically a technology which is bringing the consumer and the producer of a particular service or a particular good online in a digital space. So that's called platforms. So basically we are moving towards a platform economy where increasingly all our services, all our products, all of that is moving online. So when we talk about platform economies, that is what it means. Mariana has also explained it really well. So all of that is platform. It's a specific to the digital economy terminology. And I think, Mariana, we are going to share the glossary. We can add this term there.
Thank you very much, Mariana and Ankita, and also our participant, Yashar, who asked the question. I think it was explained very well, and Yıldız contributed. In Turkey, there are some platforms such as Yemek Sepeti or Trendyol, which actually bring together consumers and producers. And we also have given an example on the chat box. I think we now have understood it in a clearer way. I'd like to contribute. Please, Gülser, you have the floor. Well, actually, increase of mental burden of women is what we are faced with. It creates a very high mental burden for women. In a very apparent way, the mental burden of women and men are different. At 46%, it is dependent on having a child for women. I mean, I'm talking about the mental burden. And for men, let me check what was the burden. It is 69%. It is 69% for women. I mean, it's a great stress. It's for 63% of women. It is a very heavy stress. And for men, it is much lower. In daily life, mental burden in terms of tension between the spouses, 92% of women, and for men, it is 88%. It's important. Burnout, 89% for women. For men, it is for 85%. I mean, it means 83% of women and 81% of men. When they feel burnout, depression, they have these cases. So as you can see, for women and men, the rates of mental burden are very different. Women have a much higher burden. In order to reduce them, what should women do? We need to do something about this. For 60% of women and for 56 of men, there's this issue of perfection. I mean, men do not think that being perfect is a problem, and women consider this as more of a problem. Uh, and not caring is important for men. I mean, especially when it comes to housework, uh, caring for children, caring for others. I mean, men do not care at all about this, and they think the woman is going to handle this anyway, and this brings an important burden on women. I mean, not caring is something that women cannot do. I mean, men are very easily able to not care at all. They say, well, who cares? Is it that important? I mean, we all experience these things, I think, as women when we were faced with these things said by men. And for 62% of women and for 59% of men, having calm relationships is important. And for 65% of women and for 54% of men, having good health is important. So as you can see, mentally as well, women are under great burdens. I mean, not working or doing something physical, that's the burden, but organizing is a burden. I mean, it is women who are running the world if their home work was not being carried out. I mean, unpaid housework is the basis for the capitalist order because that is something based on a slavery order. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gülser. Gülser is from Antalya Women's Solidarity NGO. It is an NGO that we have. We'd like to thank Gülser for her contribution. So this concludes the first session, Introduction to Digitalization with Mariana and Ankita. We set the framework and we discussed these at length. And then on digitalization and women's labor, we listened to a very nice presentation. We now have more clarity. Now we have a 10-minute break and then we can start the second session. I'd like to thank all the speakers. Indeed, they provided valuable contributions. And for tomorrow, this indicates that we will be very motivated. Thank you.
So during the break, we are going to have a view of the film that Sharifa mentioned and hear some music. Are we all here? We are 33 right now. We were about 36, if I'm not mistaken. So let's wait for 55 past 5. So after the break, we have now started the second session. In the second session, we have digitalization and violence. First, let me talk about our speaker, Nurcihan Timur. Nurcihan Timur is from Women Coalition. She's a feminist activist. Nurcihan, are you here? Maybe she's on a break. Nurcihan, are you here? I'm here. I'm here. I was trying to arrange my sound. Okay, hello. Hello, so I'll leave you the floor. Okay, thank you very much, Julia. Hello, everyone. This is being such a great workshop for me, and also because this is my field of work and study, and hopefully these types of activities spread further out. Hello, everyone. My name is Nurcihan. I work on violence, gender-based violence. And actually, it's been almost 4 years. Since 4 years, I work on digital violence, gender-based digital violence. Can you hear me well, or I can go on without headphones? Well, actually, from the first presentations, I took your presentations as a basis, and mine will be complementary to that because everything is linked with this digital era. They always say we are living in a digital era, and the use of internet and technology is spreading further out, and as well as the good sides, there are also bad sides that are also accelerating discrimination, and gender-based violence is also being triggered. So one of the worst results of gender discrimination is gender-based violence. And also in digitalization age, the gender inequalities, biggest repercussions, one of the biggest repercussions is gender-based digital violence. So what is digital violence? Well, actually, probably first mentioned by Sofia and Ankita and Sherife. As they say, we identify two areas. One is the offline area, the offline area that we live without internet and without technology, and we have online areas. For example, we are right now in an online field. We are using Zoom. So at the moment, the inequalities between the offline arena and the online arena are the same, and the uh, inequalities in the offline area is also reflected in the online area. So they're not they're interlinked. So gender-based violence is a violation of human rights, and it has very severe repercussions. But in terms of the concept, both in the international literature and in national literature, in Turkey's literature, this is a new concept. So gender-based digital violence, we know violence, we have physical violence, economic violence, psychological violence, and sexual violence. So where should we put digital violence among these categories? When we say digital violence, it actually is a cross-cutting issue, which is relevant to all four fields, and also it has economic repercussions, and it also feeds offline violence. It could lead to physical violence as well. So it feeds all these subcategories. This is a separate let's say style. We're talking about date violence, partner violence, and in Nuran's presentations we can see also that in all international conventions we are now adding digital environment as well. In the additional interpretations in CEDAW's annex interpretations, we have digital violence as well, or violence perpetrated in the digital environment. So it is fed by offline violence, and we are facing with the same inequalities. But in defining, we have this problem: are we going to call it cyber violence, digital violence, online violence? This issue, for example, is not only relevant with the concept issue in Turkey, but the international literature also does not know what to call it yet. Nations usually say online and cyber violence. The European Commission says online violence, for example, but there is a reality that all these concepts should be considered from a feminist perspective. All these concepts should be looked from a feminist point of view, and a language should be set. But we're using them all right now: digital violence, cyber violence, online violence. They're all used at the moment. So cyberbullying, how is it different from cyberbullying? They always ask this question because cyberbullying is usually being studied for young people and for children. But when we say digital violence, it is more towards adults. It also includes children as well. But digital violence can be considered as a superior concept, and it could also include cyberbullying as well. In the previous presentations, we have seen that we always say due to gender inequality, we see digital violence. But gender inequality, when does it happen? In our daily life, plus we have gender inequality in technology as well. So we can see its use also in terms of access to technology. We know that it's the same in Turkey and in the world, that men's access to technology is higher, but the use of social media is increasing and the gap is being decreasing. Of course, women are using social media actively, and from time to time the gap is being closed, but women mostly see that do they feel safe in social media or digitally? No. When we ask all of us, among us, including this Zoom software or any software, do we feel safe when using internet, or do we feel safe when using social media? 70% or 80% would say no, we don't feel safe. There are different, of course, reasons for this, but when we look at applications, we see that they are very misogynist structures. If we talk about Turkish examples, in Turkey, the users of Facebook and Instagram, there is a gender gap, but in Twitter, there's a masculine structure. In Turkey, Twitter users in Turkey, the male ones, mostly 19%, 20% women, but users of Twitter are mostly 80% men. So the women who use Twitter in Turkey would know that Twitter includes hate speech, and it also has this gender structure that is male dominant. So women and men, which platforms do they use, and what amount are they represented there, is also a set of data we collect. Another thing is the women's status in other sectors. This was included in Sherife's presentation. Usually in IT, in information technologies, it's difficult to see women. Application producers, developers, these women who work in Facebook, in Google, we see that there's really a low number of women who are working there. This shows us that in the capitalist system, this is a male dominant part in the capitalist system, and also all the things that are developed are also sexist, and the products are also not gender sensitive. Because the IT companies there, they have these gender inequality, and due to the gender inequality in the IT services lead to this result. So who is the victim of digital violence? Usually they say everyone: children, boys, men, all of them. So in our workshops, in fixed groups, men are included, and they say we are also subject to digital violence. Yes, you are. But in digitalization, we see that women and girls are faced with digital violence 27 folds more, 27 times more they are faced with digital violence. So we can say that women, uh, with their femininity, when they become visible in social media, their risk to be subject to violence increases. Therefore, uh, women and girls, they're being subject to or exposed to digital violence is 27 times more. But just as in offline environment, in terms of the context and in terms of discrimination, it can differ in terms of femininity, in terms of different classifications, their education level, ethnical background, their work situation. Violence can differ based on these categories. The studies show that when women become more visible, they become more subject to digital violence. For example, feminist activists. The social media accounts of feminist activists, whenever they share visible campaign, for example, hate speeches under the comments are much more seen, or threat messages they receive from social media increase, or women politicians use of social media or technology is, of course, these are areas where they should be using freely, where they can also carry out their campaigns, but in their social media use, they can be subject to digital violence. So they can have, this can also be seen in their campaigns. And in Twitter, women parliamentarians were compared with male parliamentarians, and one female parliamentarian, when they announced their campaign, when they advertised their campaign, within 24 hours, they can receive 600 threats of rape on social media, on Twitter. This was a UK parliamentarian, but the same does not happen to a male parliamentarian. There are again hate speeches, but the difference is huge. The gap is huge. So this differs in terms of visibility. Plus LGBTI activists, when they express themselves in social media, it's an, of course, area where they should be freely expressing themselves. But when they openly use their ID to advocate themselves, they are subject to digital violence. Again, women authors, women journalists, disabled women. So this list goes on in terms of being subject to digital violence. But these are the ones who are more exposed because they are more visible, they share more. So who are the perpetrators? Who perpetrates this violence? It's the same with offline violence. A close friend, it could be a close friend, it could be a colleague, it could be our ex-partner, it could be our current partner, but there's a difference at all. It could be someone who is on the other end of the world. So this is the only difference from offline violence. So from one other corner of the world, you can be subject to violence. But the purpose is the same. Just as in offline violence, the aim is to have fear, to have shame, to threaten, to make them become silent, and also lynching is another purpose. There are some definitive or determinant characteristics of digital violence. I will finish my presentation in 5 minutes, and this will be the last one. It could be anonymous, so it could have a larger impact area. So we could, of course, when it is your close, when it's offline, you can see it in a more close perspective, but it could be somewhere around the world and they can be distant from you. It could be anonymous. And there are some non-determinant issues. For example, just as in Turkey, digital violence is only limited to persons surveillance, but this also includes, we know that cyber harassment, or visual sexual harassment, these are subcategories. You would know the term stalking or stalking, sorry. Someone's life can be stalked from social media. This is seen as something very light, something very pink, but we should know that this is the basis for violence, getting into someone else's life, getting information about them and using this information against them. This is not very light, and this is very important in digital violence. And there are some questions we can ask ourselves. For example, in cyber stalking. We can be surveilled through internet. Our social media accounts can be surveilled and we can be followed. And if we can give an example, a woman who was separated from her husband, she was receiving threats, death threats, and she changed her province, the city that she was in. But a friend of hers tags her on Facebook without asking her. So the ex-husband is a friend of that husband and sees this tag and identifies the location and starts threatening the woman again. So just as this, it is labeling, it's tagging on Facebook. This could lead to great repercussions. So we do know that right now. With the digitalization age, the type of violence changes. So we all know that from Instagram, from Facebook, there is aggressive flirting. So all of these actually are violence. So these are all cyber harassment. So under anything you post, you can receive hate comments. So the main person, is that person subject to digital violence? The answer should include, do we feel safe after we see that message? If we do not feel safe, if we feel tense after we see this message, it is a sign that we are subject to cyber violence. There are a lot of examples, of course, but I hope we will have time to speak about them later. But it is very frequent in Turkey and in the world. We do know that 1 out of 3 women are subject to violence, but in digital violence, we say that it's 2/3. So in offline violence, it's 1/3, but in digital violence, it's 2/3. So it's 65% more violence possibility for women who are online. So 7 out of 10 women do not feel safe online. We see it on the research studies, and there are a lot of impacts that digital violence has on women. It is actually the same with offline violence, but one of the main differences there is that we are getting out of digital area. So when we are subject to digital violence, we can shut down our social media accounts. Actually, this is we do know that it has bad repercussions. By shutting them off, we think that it ends. It is a security measure, but it takes us offline. Just as violence takes us off social life, here this takes us out of social media and digital area. So we need to find the formula of how to empower ourselves without staying out of the online arena, digital arena. But there are, of course, a lot of severe repercussions such as depression, changing jobs, changing homes, fear. One of the severest results is of course, suicide, and suicide rates are really high. Women and young girls rates, percentages of suicide is increasing. So they don't know where to go to, who to apply to. It's uncertain. So there's an uncertainty on where to go to, because this is a new type of violence and they don't know where to go and where to consult, and they don't trust everyone. So the last word could be, in every way, we need to take control of the digital arena. At a minimum level, we need to have information on how to feel safe, and our awareness on this topic should be increased. And this culture should be further extended, and workshops such as these should be more and more frequent. And I would like to thank everyone for showing their efforts to organize this. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us and having this nice presentation. Nurcihan, thank you very much. Now we have Jean Enrique. We have a video from the Philippines. She sent a video, and Jean used to be an international committee member of DKI, the World March of Women. And we are going to share a video, which is 15 minutes. So we have Jean's video of 15 minutes. And then we will proceed with questions, and then we can get back to Nurcihan with questions.
We lost the video.
Can we share the video once again? Just a second, there was a problem with the channel.
Tama.
Otherwise, we were hearing from the video and there was no problem.
Yes, it was okay. Yeah.
I am Jean Enriquez. I am the Executive Director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women Asia Pacific. I am also the National Coordinator of World March of Women in the Philippines. I would like to thank Yildiz and our sisters from Turkey for inviting us to be able to share on our work on digital violence within the context of feminist activism. So I will be shifting from PowerPoint to MP4 at some point in my presentation. So apologies if there will be some technical glitches. So let me share first my PowerPoint on digital violence and the issues within this. So even before the pandemic, before the COVID crisis, there have already been reports of trafficking online. So our organization has been receiving several complaints of Facebook advertisements for webcam modeling. So in these advertisements, the young women have been calling our attention that the term that is being used is sex work. So with this term, it seems to the young women that the harms of prostitution is being normalized or it is being hidden. And therefore, the euphemism of sex work is very confusing for young women. They are very alarmed and very threatened that the women who need tuition fee for school might be attracted or enticed towards this sexual exploitation. And for the Philippines and also our feminists, prostitution is a form of violence against women. What the women need is governmental support for their education and not further exploitation through trafficking and also prostitution. So while the women might be going into this, the consent is being bought and is also mediated by their need and their desperation to be able to continue the studies. And therefore, for the women, especially the young women, the term consent should be questioned as well. And therefore, the term sex work is inappropriate because this is actually a form of violence against women for the women, as they are calling our attention. Another issue that we have been facing since the rise of the fascist President Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines, there has been stronger links between the Philippine state and also the Chinese government. And linked to this is the mushrooming of numerous Philippine offshore gaming operators. So in the past few months, more than 140 women have been prostituted by syndicates, and many of these syndicates are Chinese. Feminist Senator Risa Ontiveros exposed that the food delivery style of providing prostituted women to workers in these Philippine offshore gaming operators. And so we have also attended a series of Senate hearings in January and February of this year to call for the closure of these Philippine offshore gaming operators, because what the women need are real jobs and not prostitution. So what the senator and also the grassroots women's groups here are asking for or demanding is for a stop to the exploitation of women's vulnerability to hunger and also to life insecurity. So other than these issues, there have been numerous online sexual harassment even before the COVID pandemic, but it also worsened during this pandemic as people have been online, especially the youth. So what we have been saying is that rape remarks are not harmless as well. These are not benign and they affect victims of sexual harassment very deeply. And it also triggers trauma among rape survivors and survivors of prostitution among the Filipino women. Unfortunately, this culture that normalizes rape comments on Facebook and other social media platforms is influenced by public officials like the Philippine president himself, who would always joke about rape and would often mouth sexist and misogynist words against women. The problem is often the targets are the actors, the movie actors, and therefore we have to emphasize that even actors are not public properties, and social media does not entitle anyone to this abuse. So there is that obligation for us feminist activists to counter patriarchal culture within a campaign to respect human rights of women, of LGBT, and other discriminated groups, to remind the public of the basic human rights principles of equality, dignity of person, and the like. And we also have been calling to stop victim blaming and to shift the accountability to the perpetrators. So during this pandemic, we have been popularizing the hotlines of, um, of duty bearers from whom victims can access justice. Other forms of violence that have been on the rise during the pandemic have been domestic violence and rape. There has been less reporting despite the higher number of cases. And why is this? Because people are limited in terms of mobility. And also they do not know who to approach, and they don't have the transportation to be able to go to the government agencies that have been mandated by the laws we pushed for to respond to all forms of violence. Also, there has been a rise in terms of trafficking and prostitution, and this has been perpetrated by those who are mobile, such as police officers, military, or the men in uniform in general. They are the ones who are purchasing the women in exchange for food. So they have been approaching the women in the communities, knowing that the women are very desperate for food and also for money. So they are taking advantage of this situation. So what we do in the face of this is that we continue to respond to numerous cases, and we have been linking up the victim survivors to direct responders of violence against women. So in the past decades, we have pushed for the laws that are responsive on cases of violence against women, on rape, on trafficking and prostitution, as well as sexual harassment in the streets. We have also trained local governments to be able to respond to this effectively. So during the pandemic, we continued these trainings on survivor-centered response to all forms of violence against women with the local community leaders or local officials. And because the internet is very scarce and connection is really not democratized in the entire Philippines, we are using cell phone to be able to do one-on-one trainings with the women responders. So this is very hard work because we do this for 2 hours every day for 3 days for the responders to be able to finish the course. At the end of it, still, the responders express that they have greater confidence to be able to attend to the cases. The other thing that we have been doing was to develop digital modules. And we try to develop this to be able to access through mobile, even without internet. But I will go to the mobile application also for reporting on violence against women after I have shared with you this a portion of the digital modules that we have developed for the communities. So that is one of the activities that we have been doing. So we have developed together with artists these modules so that the community people and their leaders will still be guided on community-based solutions to different forms of violence against women and children. So another digital response that we did was to develop also this mobile application for reporting of VOW or violence against women. So even without load or internet, they can fill up the form and they will also be shown this map as to where are the nearest agencies that can respond to them. So before this application is released, we have trained also the local authorities on what is rights-based, gender-responsive, and survivor-centered response. So we only finished that this week, and now we are ready to present this mobile application to a pilot area in the Philippines. So we have trained also the Women and Children Protection Unit of hospitals, and through this mobile application also they will be receiving advisories on how to respond to violence against women and what to remember in terms of principles such as avoiding victim blaming, about expressing solidarity with victim survivors of violence. We are also enhancing this mobile application so that it can be voice sensitive, so that when women shout, when they are being abused, then this mobile application can immediately send message to the responders that we have trained. Other than this, we continue to partner with our feminist activists on the ground, and they have been distributing these posters on strategic areas in the communities, especially in Muslim Mindanao, where information is still scarce. And also on alcohol, hygiene alcohol, we have put stickers which also contain the hotlines for violence against women responders. And we have also been mobilizing relief for the women in prostitution and other survivors of violence. And through the relief that we have channeled to them, they were able to save some funds to be able to build cooperative type livelihood programs. And they have started to sew masks and also to start food delivery, especially since hunger is a real problem in the community. So we connected the women with the farm producers in the face of problems also of farmers that there are no buyers of their produce. So what we did is to connect the farmers to the consumers, particularly our groups of survivors of prostitution. So through this, we are somehow able to alleviate the condition of both farmers and also the women. We continue to hold online programs, and we even hold rallies online. And this has been mobilizing thousands of people online. But we have been conscious also to reach to the grassroots that do not have access to the internet. And therefore, we make sure that we are able to support them through internet prepaid load. So this is one of the examples of the programs weekly of the World March of Women in the Philippines. So we called it the Women in the Front Lines, how to respond to all forms of violence against women. And finally, 2 weeks ago, we also filed a case at the Supreme Court against the anti-terrorism law because this was a recently passed law by the government which seeks to surveillance activists not only for 30 days but for 60 days. And it also legalizes warrantless arrest. And so we observed physical distancing and we still filed a case at the Supreme Court. So these are the forms of resistances that we can share with you in the faces of the rise also of digital violence. We resist to live, we march to transform.
Thank you very much. She will most probably watch us through YouTube. Thank you for being involved by her video, and great to see her video. Now we have the Q&A session. Do we have any questions? I think we had a question. I will read this from the chat. I think from Gönül Yılmaz. We have a question. The question was to Nurcihan. Women are more reachable online. What could we do for that? Would you like to ask the question, Gönül? Hello. Actually, not a question, but more as a comment. I just wanted to write it down. Because you talked about lynching, and very recently I also wanted to say in Turkey recently digital environment is very suitable for lynching political parties, for women, for LGBTI communities. They are being lynched, and for all women without any discrimination, for all women uh, are using the internet, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, all women, they do not feel safe when using the internet, but without feeling safe, they are throwing themselves into the sea. It's an analogy. They walk there. They are subject to violence from their spouses, their partners, but being offline is not a solution. So what should we do? That's what I meant by writing that question. Okay, thank you, Gönül. Thank you. And by the way, Kenan shared on the chat that with Tibet, we prepared a set of guidelines. These guidelines are also in English, so it's good that we shared it on the chat box. All definitions are there, all relevant definitions are also there. And what we also say in response to your question as well, we shouldn't, of course, refrain from the digital area, but we are being subject to severe violence, digital violence, and the answer to this could be ensuring digital security. But these are very technical issues. New workshops are happening in Turkey, how to ensure minimum security online. For example, how to set your password. These minimum level security measures helps us feel safe. Of course, just as in violence, it's not only an issue to raise awareness on women. So what do the technology companies do on this? If a woman is not feeling safe on the internet when using social media, it means that there's a problem there. And to what extent technology companies are aware of this? And to what extent do they know that the platforms that they developed are feeding violence? We had this in the first presentations. They're collecting data, they're selling our data, and they're trying to earn profits. But how do they think of the technical side of this? Violence is the heaviest part of it, and we shouldn't put all the responsibility on women. Of course, we're going to raise our awareness. Of course, we're going to raise the level of information, but we're not going to be the ones that has this whole responsibility. What do the technological companies do on this? We need to advocate for this. Let me add one thing. It's connected to this. We had digital activism courses in women's studies. I couldn't participate, but there were some colleagues who were participating in the course, and I asked one attendee, what is digital activism? And she said, walk on snow without showing your footstep. That's digital activism. So we don't know how to do this. Maybe that's the problem. Thank you, Nurcihan Gönül. And Miss Yashar, she asked for the floor. Yashar, can you hear us? I think she has a question. Yashar? Yes, I can hear you. Hello? When everyone's calling each other with their first names, please call me Yashar, not Yashar Hanım, Miss Yashar. It's not that I'm the only Miss in the group. Actually, we don't have Miss at all, but you know, we has this expression. Sometimes we use it as a show of respect. Okay, let me say hello, and let me ask the colleague, the friend. We see that digital violence is increasing a lot, and it seems as if it is the continuance of the violence we have in our offline life, but it's ever increasing. So we remember a slogan of women's struggle. We are seeing violence on the streets, but we want the streets to be illuminated, to be lighted, because we want to be on the streets at night as well. So we don't want to be off the streets, but we need to find methods to cope without getting off the field. So we can probably find a slogan for this, and we can further strengthen our struggle. Maybe we need to find that slogan. It's actually what we say is that we're not leaving the digital arena. Just as we're not leaving the streets, we're not leaving the digital area, digital environment. Of course, there's a responsibility that comes with it, and the responsibility should also be borne by the ones who are developing these, and we're advocating for this, of course. Thank you, Nurjihan and Yashar. Are there any more questions? Let me check the chat box. I haven't seen any questions on chat, but do you want to raise your hand and ask question? Maybe I can have a short contribution. My name is Gülser. There is a concept called ethics for accuracy or ethics for diligence. So maybe Nurjihan could give us a contribution on this. In terms of gender inequality, maybe we should think on the perspective that this should be considered as a theorem of law as well. In Turkey, we have not seen, or we haven't existed as feminists on this on these issues. What do you think, Nurjihan? Yes, exactly. The area is a bit, let's say, empty right now. There are a lot of rights in the law. The right to be forgotten, for example, or the right to be forgotten is a right that women should enjoy in the digital environments, but right now it's only being used for deleting the histories. But of course, thank you for reminding us that in legal arena we should also have, let's say, defense on this arena. Thank you. I think the right to be forgotten, we are using it a lot. This is a term that is used a lot. Thank you, Gülser. Are there any other questions? Because we need to move on. I think Zeynep is asking for the floor. The issue is that Jean herself is not here, but it doesn't seem fair to skip one thing. I couldn't see the translation, so prostitution and sex work. I need to put a note to that. In Turkey, there are different discussions, of course, but as far as I know from what Yıldız says, is that in Philippines, the terms sex worker and prostitution, the Philippines have they are insisting on not calling it sex work and sex worker. And this is, of course, this, how do we call it? This is the forms of relation that women are being forced towards. But I think we are more agreed on calling it sex worker. Probably, let me underline it. So we have this, yes, this is an important emphasis. We have to call it sex worker. But Philippines, they have the public side, the official side, they are the officials also are supporting prostitution. Maybe that's why they don't want to call it sex worker. The governments always call it prostitution. Yes, of course, it changes from context to context and culture to culture. It changes from feminist preference, and from culture to culture the issues could differ, but for us we can underline it as something else. Personally, calling them sex workers, or calling it the concept sex worker, feels better from my point of view. Thank you for your contribution, Zeynep. Now we are going to talk about digitalization in education, and we have Yaşar among us. She's a member of Antalya Eğitim Sen, which is a trade union for education professionals in Antalya. So she's also going to talk about EBA, which is the distance learning system in Turkey. So I will leave the floor to Yaşar now. Hello once again. Hello sisters in Turkey and my sisters all around the world. Of course, as the entire world is experiencing during the pandemic, since March, the schools were shut down in Turkey, and very suddenly we met the concept distance learning. And we know about distance education. We used to use our computers. We used the computers in the classrooms, but we did not have. The interpreters lost audio of the speaker. Yaşar, we no longer hear you. I think Yaşar is having an internet problem, so everyone's screens are frozen, right? I think she's having internet connection problems. She's off the Zoom, right? Right now. She's no longer among us. Let's wait a while. Maybe she'll come back shortly. Maybe we can proceed with the other speaker, and when Yaşar comes back, she can take the floor. Nuray, are you here with us? Can we switch places just to use time efficiently? Nuray, can you hear us? About digital law. We can speak about digital law until Yaşar connects back. Sure, I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry. Okay, I'll leave the floor to you now, digital law. Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It is great to see and be together with women from all around the world. Let me very fastly start my presentation. I have a presentation of digital law and women. And actually, many previous speakers talked about the issues already, so I will give a law point of view. And digitalization, which has received a momentum recently, also spread furthermore fastly in our life after the pandemic as well. Digitalization is everywhere in our world, and the groups that are being subject to violation of rights are also being subject to violation of rights in the digital environment as well. The disabled, elderly, children, migrants, people have differences in terms of opinions, for religious opinions or any other reasons. LGBTI individuals and women, who are the subject of our meeting today, of course are subject to discrimination. And of course this is not only having online and virtual repercussions, but they have direct touch to individuals. So using these digital tools, it is also carried from the offline area to online area, or right the opposite, from online area to the public area and offline area. There's types of violence and inequality in the offline arena as well. So gender-based discrimination and violence also are seen in the online arena, and to prevent it we need two actions: actions to do, actions to not do. So for women's access to online areas, we need to empower women, and to protect women from digital threats, we need to provide securities and guarantees. So when law is insufficient at the online arena, then there are different online actions such as lynching and different normalization of violation of various rights on the online environment. So how do we have these rights and responsibilities that are regulated in the offline arena? How is it regulated in the online arena? What should law do in the digital area? In 2012, the Human Rights Council of the United Nations created published a document in terms of protecting humans' rights digitally. And this brings on an important principle in the digital environment. Everything that is valid on the offline arena should also be valid in the online environment. All rights should be enjoyed in the online environment as well. The internet is universal. There is no restriction of time and place in the internet. And because internet allows for anonymity, there are also some regulations that are required. The rights of women in the digital area comes from the first right of women in the digital area comes to access to internet services. So the state services becoming digitalized, public and private issues, so many applications can now be received from the internet. So these all require women's access to internet as well. So individuals being able to follow their public works digitally, and e-commerce, e-trade is very important as well. This is an example that is a right to be enjoyed. Access to news, access to information, internet is a must. And of course, in terms of free speech, internet is used as a widespread tool. Online education, online publications, online broadcasts, all these facilities make internet vital. Access to internet is vital now. Therefore, gender inequality, to restrict women having and not having access to internet, is as similar as women being illiterate. For example, in Turkey, internet user women's rate is 73%, and male internet users are 85%, and internet user women's is 50.6%, and for men it's around 60%. So these are old studies, but these are important factors. Sure, computer literacy is important in this sense as well, but I will come back to this point. So women's access to internet and digital tools, and to increase their active use, first of all requires a duty on the shoulders of men. And of course, national and international forms require some obligations to ensure this digital uses and rights. Therefore, all countries, some countries defined digital rights. Internet access is a right, and United Nations also says that everyone has the right to access to internet and use the internet. And this is in this document, this is a primary document, and in all just as in all modern constitutions, non-discrimination is also the second principle, which is relevant in terms of all constitutions and all relevant laws. And in the non-discrimination document, there are different items, and it says that every man and woman have the right to have access to internet, learn it, define it, and shape it. So women and men have equal rights in these duties, and in order to ensure gender equality, women needs to be involved in all areas that require internet access. So 12 years ago, internet had some decisions, recommendation decisions, and in terms of internet access and skills, it is mentioned as in the information society, in order to enjoy all rights, it is indispensable. So it says that the internet for states is a public service, just as internet, just as water and electricity.
Here, I think we need to focus on the difference between mere access and use. However, we need to also refer to the fact that not only the state, but also private sector and the media have also some responsibilities in eliminating gender inequality in the digital sphere. Another important Council of Europe Convention is the Council of Europe Convention on prevention and fight against violence against women and domestic women. In other words, the Istanbul Convention, which is open to be signed in the city that I'm participating in this international program. In Article 17 of this convention, there is a responsibility given to the ICT sector and the media to contribute to the creation and implementation of the policies on preventing violence against women and to increase the respect for women dignity and to the creation of guidelines and self-regulating standards to this effect. The expressions of participating in all areas relating to the development of internet and also the expressions of internet usage capacity and capability in addition to access indicate that even women's use of digital tools may be prevented or interrupted due to gender inequality. The duties that are given to women in life and the stereotypical roles are an artificial but a great barrier in their higher competency in the area of ICT. The fact that domestic labor is left to the women in addition to the care responsibility of care for the people at home is one of the reasons. Even if there's internet access at home, while others are spending time in front of the screen, women, and they are developing themselves for these tools, women's may be dealing with their gender assigned roles in the society, and actually social stereotypes and the social acceptances that digital things are not part with women may actually and even girls may be kept away from using digital tools and except when playing computer games, except for games that would be live simulations or fashion games. In the past, it actually was seeing in different ways in different areas such as sports, but in the digital area women are actually working to be more individually competent or professionally specialized. They are passively not supported, and actively they are being subjected to mobbing or not being put in a position that they deserve. So there is a lack of empowerment for women that may even go up to violence. And every type of violence is considered to be a violence in all domestic regulations and international human rights. And gender-based digital violence is also a very widely seen type of violence. For example, in SEDAV, the General Recommendation number 35, paragraph 20 states that, and the speaker reads paragraph 20, and also in paragraph 37 of this recommendation number 35 also recognizes that women's human rights are online as well, and according to paragraph 37, encouraging the creation of or strengthening of self-regulatory mechanisms by the media, including online or social media, aimed at elimination of gender stereotypes relating to women and men or to specific groups of women, and to address gender-based violence against women that takes place through their service and platforms. For example, this is one of the measures that is listed there. And another measure would be to create guidelines for the appropriate coverage by the media of cases of gender-based violence against women, or establishing and or strengthening the capacity of national human rights institutions to monitor or consider complaints regarding any media that portray gender discriminatory images or content that objectify or demean women or promote violent masculinities. So we can see that in the paragraph, there are certain responsibilities assigned not only specific to the digital area, but also because social media has started taking the place of traditional media. When it comes to digital violence, in addition to international women's rights documents and mechanisms such as Istanbul Convention and CEDAW, which provide certain safeguards, but also domestic legislation is also very important. And digital violence should be prevented, and should not only be prevented, but following the 4P structure presented by Istanbul Convention: prevention, protection, prosecution, and integrated policies may make it possible to eliminate violence and ensure justice. So if we were to apply this ranking to digital violence, first of all, in order to prevent digital violence, first awareness should be created, and this awareness should be to indicate that the actions taken in the digital area could constitute a crime just as they would offline, and the rights and liabilities also exist in online area as well. Another method could be to ensure a mental transformation, fighting against gender-based attitudes, prejudices, gender-based roles, and prejudiced opinions are crucial to eliminate both violence and discrimination at their roots. And the fact that the digital violence actions are sanctioned in the domestic regulation, and if they are recognized as a crime in criminal law, might prevent some deterrence. And just to give an example for our legal system, for example, the messages of the perpetrator that include sexual harassment is not recognized as a separate type of crime if they are sent through social media messages. However, the law has an expression which says by benefiting from the facilitation provided by electronic communication tools, online sexual harassment can also be investigated and prosecuted. Again, stalking, if it is committed through digital means, for example, if a woman is stalked through social media, again, it falls under a certain type of crime under our criminal law. For example, the victim of stalking is actually a subject that is recognized without any regard for the gender in the law, which is known as the law number 6284 in Turkey. So when no prevention can be provided, sufficient and urgent protection is provided to those persons who are exposed to violence. And for the perpetrator, a restraining order, limitation; for the victim, psychological or financial support; access to legal aid, placing in shelter, preventing access, and providing support in a language that is understood by the victim are very important protection mechanisms. Prosecution of digital violence is also very important to ensure that digital violence is also criminalized in terms of legality, and that there's a fair trial against this crime. When it is digital violence, the only difference is relating to the proof. Having a screenshot by making sure that the sender hour date is visible, and by using legal evidence-taking methods are important issues to identify an anonymous user. In the carrying out all of these methods in cooperation with all the institutions and subjects in the society makes all of the efforts comprehensive and effective. Developing integrated policies is important in this sense. And in order to eliminate gender-based digital violence, training, health, communication technologies, justice institutions, NGOs, individuals, all segments of the society should be in cooperation, and this would create a big difference in every area. Talking about integration, we need to make sure that the human rights of women should also be addressed when it comes to the protection of the personality rights and protection of labor of women in the digital area as well. Having your photograph captured, having your name used, unpermitted sharing of your personal data, and protection of your intellectual and artistic works and your works such as patents are safeguards of the women's presence in the digital area. And for that, in all necessary levels, having a gender-based approach is of course very important, and women who are creating, working and present in the digital area may be subject to unfair treatments in this area. And we have started using social media more and more to experience our freedom. And according to the statistics, the number of social media users also increased greatly during the pandemic. And we are actually organizing this event over Zoom through the internet. And usually the members of the women's movement that is making an effort to ensure that the human rights of women are ensured usually remain as only opposition. Therefore, the issue of freedom of expression is very important for women who do not only remain in a passive position and should be there more when absolute equality is ensured. Online freedom of expression is emerging as a freedom that needs to be recognized in multidimensional areas such as intellectual rights, press, communication, culture, arts, and science, because everything is becoming digitalization. And I did not talk about this in the presentation, but I will talk about the right to be forgotten, because with the social media changes, there have been certain changes, but the right to be forgotten depends on the content of the publication, the time it was published, whether it is current or not, whether it can be considered like a historical data or not, whether it contributes to public benefit or not, whether the subject topic of the news is a politician or celebrity or not, the topic of the news or not, whether these news include any values or not, or the public interest on the subject, all depend on the case where right to be forgotten is requested, and they need to be evaluated. And of course, there have been some changes with the latest new regulations on social media, but Nurjan was very modest and left me to consider this issue, but she was very right when she was talking about the current events. I don't know whether I exceeded my time limit. And finally, in the digitalization word, well, I hope that all rights and freedoms of women are present in the digital area. And thank you very much. Well, I was going to give you 2 more minutes to wrap up, but I think it's finished, right? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, because we suddenly had to put you under the spotlight because there was a technical problem. And I also would like to introduce you, by the way. I wanted to talk about Nural. Nural is working on women's rights and ICT, and also she has provided digital law training in several different projects, just as she did here. And she also talked about Istanbul Convention because it's a convention that protects women with such a wide perspective that by introducing digital, I mean, it was actually inevitable that we would be going into the Istanbul Convention when we were talking about digitalization. So now, Yaşar Tarakçı Okudan from Antalya Eğitim Sen. I think she's here, right? Yes, Yaşar, you have the floor now.
Yashar, you need to unmute yourself. Hello, once again. Can you hear me? Okay. As you know, in March, just as the case in all around the world, in Turkey, different measures were taken with the pandemic. And as of 16th of March, the schools were shut down. And millions of teachers and parents and students have met the concept of distance education. When we say digitalization and education, we always think about the use of computers, accessing different content through computers, and having courses, classes in the classroom with computers. But today it turned out to be full on classes, lectures from our homes. So as I mentioned before, distance education is also distant from equality. Miss Nejla, Professor Nejla said this. And the inequalities in the normal environment is also carried over to digital arena. The access to internet, computer, even TVs is impossible for some of our students. And when we consider some technical infrastructure problems, we see a huge group of problems in education. So in the interval between March to June, Ministry of National Education actually tried to solve the problems and make decisions by doing and learning, doing by learning system. So they did not include the trade unions, the educationalists in any decision making, and they did the same in education area as well. So the relevant teachers, educators, and the trade unions' opinions were disregarded. So when we say digital in Turkey, the first thing you would remember from Turkey was the Fatih project, which started in 2011. It was a very posh project. They promised to distribute tablets to all students, and the teachers would be trained on digital education, and the EBA system, distance learning system that we are being using today, was set up back then, and it is actually a failure study which used up 30 million Turkish lira. If it was successful back then, today we would have the remote education process without experiencing any problems. Actually, before the pandemic, flexible and precarious work in terms of educated teachers, precarious work was trying to be solved by certain regulations, and we do not have auxiliary personnel at all. And after the decree laws in the state of emergency period, just as in many arenas, a lot of teachers were also dismissed from their jobs. And today, 1 million education workers are seeing, actually realizing that flexible work is also precarious work. So this is a bitter experience that we have. And there are some examples that were reflected on the media as well. The first example is that one teacher climbed a hill because he needed to get better internet reception, but when he tried to climb the hill, that teacher had a heart attack and died. Another example was that we had teacher friends who were husbands and wives, and when they were having online courses, they had to leave their child to the care of their neighbor, and 2.5-year-old child died on the care of that neighbor because she fell from a balcony. So precarious work, flexible work, working from home is actually threatening our lives as well. So pandemic management led to a more authoritarianism for our ruling party. As you know, all decisions made disregarded the opinions of the trade unions, the opposition parties, the relevant other stakeholders. For example, in the period that used to say stay at home, the women used to an activity as simple and as joyous as drawing a rainbow was seen as a symbol by the ruling party, and it was tried to be dismissed. So our participants from Brazil and different countries, our previous speakers said that they had fascist ruling parties, and it is the same case for us as well. And the burden increased for everyone when we stayed home, but as everyone knows, it increased twice for women. Domestic work increased twice. This also was fed by new responsibilities, such as following the homework of children, the online courses of children, cleaning, care for the elderly. These are already the responsibility that were attributed to women within the house. And as we all know, domestic violence is violence that women and children subject to at home, and exploitation of children and sexual harassment also increased during the pandemic. According to a UNICEF study, 6 million children are deprived of distance education. When we look at the entire world, we are talking about 460 million children who do not have access to remote education, who do not have access to education. So in one hand, both in Turkey and in the world, economic crisis is also being aggravated, and starting with health crisis, education crisis is also added on top of this, and this led to the situation that the ruling party cannot manage the situation, and oppression towards the opposition parties, taking them under custody and giving them under trustees, were also giving municipalities under the ruling of a trustee. All of these practices further increased in our country. Actually, education in our country never included equality for different segments of the society. We did not have equal opportunities in education. And with this understanding of management of the ruling party, we do not see that the teachers, the students, the parents, their opinions are not heard by them, and their voices are shut down by them. Us as ATIMSEN, the Trade Union for Education, for years we have been struggling for education which is equal for all, which disregards any discrimination based on language or any ethnicity. We are struggling for free of charge education and equal for all. But in today's conditions, education is facing a threat of being turned into a privilege that can only be used by the ones with money. It's a privilege, no longer a right. Why? Because there are private education institutions, private courses, but actually education should not be a privilege. Education is an indispensable human right. As you know, in September, the first grades and preschool education started face-to-face, and I am a preschool teacher, and I started having face-to-face courses with children 1 or 2 days a week. But on the second day of face-to-face education, on the 22nd of September, EBA system, distance education system in Turkey, actually crashed down because of the busy load on the system. And the Minister of National Education said that he was very happy because there was such high demand to distance education system that it crashed down. But actually, the minister should have felt ashamed for this, but the Minister of Education said there's high demand, we're happy. So actually, he is a boss of a private education school. So in terms of seeing education as a commercial activity, probably his words Summers were right in his point of view. So access to finance, access to internet, inequality of duration of use, and especially differences of private schools and state schools, examinations, students and teachers requiring technical assistance, their problems are not solved at all. And still the teachers are put into this work, they're thrown into this work, and they're saying we have security issues in digitalization, but we have no possibility of considering security in a digital environment, because every day we have new official letters, and the school principals are forcing our teachers to give lectures through all platforms. For example, I work in a secondary school, and in my school teachers 100% are giving lectures, but student participation, student attendance does not exceed 50%. Even in schools that are in good shape, the students are not attending uh, distance education. Since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, we have taken over great responsibility actually as ATIMS and as a trade union. We try to publish journals, we try to publish bulletins and try to share the problems brought by COVID also on the field as well. And my friends went out on the field to carry out surveys. We also organized workshops. For example, in August, we said we organized a workshop about the problems of women workers during the pandemic. And on the 4th of September, we had a distance education workshop. And as a result of these workshops, there were some striking but expected results. The first result was that in access to education, inequality further increased. And the number of students who have access to distance education decreased. And the third one is student participation in classes were not ensured. And four, teachers did not find the opportunity to evaluate and assess the education that they delivered. Five, digital facilities, digital content was insufficient. For example, in foreign language classes, digital content was not created at all. And in EBA and in other content providers, some security problems were experienced. And in lessons through EBA TV, since there were no interaction at all, the children ceased watching those classes. And until the 1st of October, sports, arts, and music classes were disregarded. Actually, it's not distance education, but it's distance teaching. So it is focused on teaching in distance education period, and sufficient materials were not given to students and teachers, and support in terms of digital content were not given, and this support is up to the hands of the political parties, municipalities, even the media bosses. The ruling party who was governing the country continued its anti-democratic practices in the education area as well. And as I mentioned before, ATIMSAN, the education trade union's recommendations on the issue are disregarded. But us as ATIMSAN trade unionists, we have not given up our struggle until today, and from now on, we will not give up our fight either, and we are not giving up our demand for equal free of charge education and equal rights to education, especially for every student, including mother tongue language for Kurdish students and Syrian students as well. Free of charge education should be provided to all. Education is an indispensable right for everyone. This is not a privilege, this is a right for everyone. And we want budget for health and for education. In all of our events, we said this: do not invest in budgets in war, do not invest budgets in making profit, but health and education. We have once again witnessed how important this was. We are not complaining on how budget is insufficient, but we do not want to see a minister of education who says the budget is limited due to the salaries paid to the teachers. The Minister of Education should ask why don't we have sufficient budget for education, but he is now questioning why are we paying these salaries to teachers. He is not questioning that we should get more budget towards education. We are saying that education is not a commodity and students are not consumers, and education is not commerce. And we are going to celebrate World Teacher Day, and in all around the world it's going to be celebrated as teachers are becoming leaders. Of course, due to pandemic we are facing severe conditions, but starting with teachers with a TIMSAN, our trade union, all teachers should hold the hands of their students and they should act with this historic responsibility, and we will continue struggling for our rights, and we will not give up our demand for quality, high quality education, equal education, and education for all. And when we say education for all, we are talking about education for the society and the entire world. When we are talking about education, this is precious and we are aware of how precious this is. And I would like to thank all my friends. Then I say we can fight together. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any questions? We can ask questions to Yashar or Nurai. Gönül, you have a question? Not a question, but a contribution, actually. Digitalization and education. When we say this, when we have the point of view of a teacher, let me have that point of view. For the last 6-7 months, we have started delivering our classes from digital platforms, and we have entered this digital environment without infrastructure preparation, and Yashar shared these problems briefly with us. And I will try to draw a general framework in terms of digitalization in education. First, digitally, education was going to go further, and we are talking about AI, and other sectors will be, of course, impacted by AI. Our work will be taken over by machines, and rather than being caught off guard, we needed to consider how we can force ourselves, how we can further develop ourselves. For example, we need to consider the fact that students with disabilities are finding it very difficult to obtain distance education, and also girls during the pandemic, since they are at home, they couldn't go outside. Girls between the ages 13 to 17, child marriages increased in this period, and in that sense, digitalization and education will be discussed further. Now, uh, I think we are inside this questions. We are having this debate, but we will further elaborate. I want you to also contribute, because you all have children, you are facing the problems as parents. There are parents who do not know how to use Zoom. There are parents who do not know how to use WhatsApp. And in this sense, I am waiting for your contributions as well. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gönül. You wrapped up very well, and you've also emphasized girls, because with 4+4, girls were already going home after they finished 4 years of education. And then when it became digitalized, it actually gained a new dimension. Are there any other questions to Nural or Yashar? Zeynep wants to take the floor. As educationalists, we cannot stop Thank you to Yashar and Kanul. I also would like to provide some little contribution. Due to digitalization, on one hand, job security is no longer available, but and we have many friends who are working in private schools and private universities. They were faced with unemployment, and we know that there have been some private universities who dismissed many people in this period. And due to economic problems, private schools were already doing this, but they've used digitalization as an opportunity and started firing more people. So maybe with in terms of this education dimension, we need to organize a whole different event, because in terms of how it's reflected to students and children as educationalists, we've understood one more thing. Once again, education was already undergoing a crisis, but what we know to be a public sphere, which brings different segments of the society and has an important part in socialization. So we forgot that dimension of schooling. I mean, through maybe lessons, through tests, so we were subjecting the school children to those. But as teachers, we forgot in terms of socialization and democratization, we forgot how schools had a critical position. So with this painful experience, we understood as once again, in terms of the socialization of children, there are also many things that need to be done. And I will conclude my words after saying this. Thank you very much for your contribution, Zainab. We have lots of educationalists and they've provided their contributions. So from other participants, if we have anyone else from the education sector, we would like to also get their comments. You could raise your hand, or you could write on the chat. Or if we have other educationalists outside Turkey, maybe they would like to comment on the situation. Let's have a look. Or do we have any parents, maybe parents of students? Maybe they also might want to convey their experiences. Okay, then, if we do not have any more questions, then in order to provide a summary of today, I'd like to leave the floor to Yıldız. Yıldız is here. And Wilhelmina would like to add something, by the way. Okay, Wilhelmina, I just saw it. You want to say something. Can you hear us? Let's unmute her microphone. Okay, then.
Oh, hi, can you hear me? Hi, comrades. There are so many questions that I have, but I'd like to reserve them actually for tomorrow when I've heard more of the inputs. But I would just like to share and say that listening to all the inputs, you know, we are so connected. The stories that you or what you're sharing is so familiar. It's just as if it's, you know, you are living in my backyard, because in education, in law, in, you know, all the fields, it's so similar. Just to put some perspective in terms of South Africa, the one advantage, I would say, just in parentheses, is that South Africa, the coronavirus kind of started here when already it was in Europe and in China. So we were able to learn and a lot from what happened in those countries and prepare for it. So we were kind of ahead of the curve, as so to speak, because we reacted to what we learned from others. So in the field of education, for example, like everybody else, the schools were locked down immediately. But as we all know, that what this virus has done is to highlight the inequalities in our society. It just magnified it. And as you all know, South Africa, in terms of the Gini coefficient, has the highest gap between the rich and the poor. So there was a lot that we had to do in terms of just how do we teach uh, online? How do we take how do we take online teaching to a community that doesn't have electricity? Um, how do you take online teaching to a society that you know, they're living in a home where it's just the space is occupied by, you know, 20, 12 people who are now home because they no longer can go to work. So how do you have privacy in terms of just being able to focus or concentrate on what you're doing? So yeah, it was a lot to contend with, and so a lot to organize. And I dare say that I'm listening to the convent on education, but here the unions didn't help much in terms um, of coming up with resolving the problems. It was more of a, you know, no, we can't do this. No, you know, the more complaints than actually helping out. So it was a very different situation in South Africa. But as I speak now, our schools have opened. The universities have, some of them just have their first year students back. Most of the students are doing digital online distance learning, and they've adjusted the school year. They've completely, in terms of exam time and when the terms ended, they've extended it into the end of the year vacation. So a lot of adjustments were made, and so those changes. I just wanted to make one other comment, because there's so many questions that I have. Is in terms of when we speak about the law, and I've listened very carefully, I just wanted to put a question out there, and maybe we can continue talking about it tomorrow, that when we are confronted with Facebook and Zoom banning organizations of using their platforms, for example, the recent banning of Zoom not allowing Laila Khalid to participate in a webinar that was organized in the UK because she, you know, because of her history. He was a Palestinian front. So, and then just how do we react to that? I mean, because here we are sitting using Zoom, and Zoom is restricting other militants from using its platform. So it was just a question out there. I suppose when we conclude tomorrow, we could come up with how do we counteract this? How do we support or give solidarity to organizations like that, or to women out there? I just want to just take this opportunity to thank Hilders and her comrades there for this excellent program. I'm learning so much, and hopefully tomorrow I can contribute more and tell you more about what is happening in South Africa, especially on the labor front as well. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Wilhelmina. By the way, I'd like to introduce Wilhelmina. By the way, she's from the World March of Women from South Africa, and she was also here with us last week. And by the way, Tika added something on the chat. Would you like to talk? I don't know, but said that the situation is very similar in Brazil with what's happening in Turkey in terms of digitalization and education in the coronavirus period regarding what women, workers, teachers, and mothers are facing. They're saying that the situation is very similar and they're facing with similar problems. We'd like to thank Tika as well for her contribution. So unless there are any other questions, then we've reached the end of the second session. I'm going to ask Yıldız to provide a summary of the day. Yıldız, you now have
Thank
the floor.
Thank you, Julia, for this moderation. It's an excellent moderation in a long day. I'm speaking on English channel. excuse me, because I'm recording English channel of this workshop. We try to record it in English, in Turkish, and in Spanish. And also we have presentations. Some of us send their presentations, so hopefully in future, and the sisters in Antalya can make it to publish as a food for thought, as a food for the discussion, for future discussion. It is a very important discussion for our movement also. It is because we try to understand the developments in the world we live in order to develop new strategies for the struggle. So we have important points in this meeting also. One of the most important thing that what's happening in the education field is that shows that it's not the health services but also education services collapsed with this pandemic. And in the beginning of pandemic, we described this situation as a humanitarian crisis, and we need to raise the demand to reclaim public services and commons. So it is very important to reclaim them. And also what the sister from Argentina said is very important. We need to define new rights in the face of digital economy or digitalization. And so the situation is not the same. In fact, it is worse in terms of gender inequalities and the discrimination between men and women, and also between peoples, between regions. For example, here today there are sisters registered from Africa, but only Wilhelmina could make it to join. We know that the infrastructure in some regions is not good. Even in Turkey last week we had another webinar with the local woman from the northeast of Turkey, and we saw that they had a lot of troubles with infrastructure, internet infrastructure. When we transfer files and recordings, we had a lot of troubles with them. So what emerged in this pandemic that become more visible, we already know it, but it is more visible now, is the inequalities and uneven development between regions, between men and women. So it is very important discussion. I also would like to thank to the sisters in Antalya who made this workshop possible in such an important and crucial moment. And another thank to IT for Change from India, who motivated us to have this workshop. So today we had a lot of new concepts. We heard a lot of new rights to disconnect, and also computer literacy, and a lot of new words and concepts. So it is just an introduction. So it is good to keep this discussion going. We need to find different ways of continue this discussion. So this is what I can tell now as a wrap up. If you want to add something, so please go on.
Thank you very much, Yıldız. You wrapped up the day very well. And this is a great summary as an overall framework. Anyone who would like to add anything else? Today is the 3rd of October. This is the second session of Digitalization and Women workshop. We are going to close after this. Tomorrow we'll be here again. If anybody would like to add anything, you can write on the chat box or you can just take the floor. All right, please go ahead. Julia, in this time, I wonder one thing. For example, Mariana, in their country, what's the situation in their country about education in this period? Could you give us some information on this? All right, Mariana is here, right? She's among us. Maybe we can ask the question to her, Mariana.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yes, so I live in Switzerland, and right now, let's say that the economic imperative of restarting everything again is going, it's being more important than people's lives and health security. So the classes have resumed. In-presence class is being made for primary school. I have someone from my family who is a primary teacher, and she told me that the teachers are being responsible, for instance, for buying and for disinfecting classroom, for buying alcohol to disinfect, that nothing is being provided in order to assure that the teachers and the students will be safe. In the university, there has been some arrangements to split the classrooms between three groups, and they do not go all at the same time. But what we feel sometimes is that the COVID has been also used to like an excuse to keep us from doing certain activities. For instance, the university was not very much willing to accept that we make a feminist event, and their excuse was that it was because of COVID, but other events are taking place. So we suspect that COVID is being used politically to keep us from discussing things that are really important. Another thing that I would like to say is that, as you probably know, there are many people, often who come from the global south, who are who work at home at the houses of Swiss families. These are often undocumented people with a very precarious conditions of work. And as Ildis was saying, that the health system is collapsing in Turkey, here we see that it's on the backs of the migrant people who are working in very precarious conditions that this health crisis is landing. Because in all of the government's response to the pandemics, this was not taken into account. It is as if there is not a huge amount of women from the global south working in the houses of Swiss families to fill the so-called crisis of care that exists in the global north. And these are women that are working in very precarious situations and being very exposed to the virus. Considering that Switzerland does not have a proper public health system, this is very problematic. So I think that like in other places, there are some peoples that are having to carry this crisis on their backs. That's what I can say briefly about the situation in Switzerland.
Thank you, Mariana. Let me add one thing. In the first days of the pandemic, I participated in an online training, and then there was a training on what would happen in the post-pandemic process. And the women said that women staying home, coming home, would go work will go on from the house. Women are already shouldering the childcare, and the occupation of caretaking, caregiving will become more important, but unregistered, undocumented work would increase because they're not paying for social security of these women, and this would further increase, they said. I wanted to add it, and when Mariana said this, I thought about that. Any other
Sorry.
contributions?
Okay, no, go ahead, Zainab. Sorry.
I'm not going to contribute, but by the way, it is asking to learn about the agenda for tomorrow. Maybe after Mariana speaks, we can also give the agenda for tomorrow. Mariana, I think you want to add something?
It was precisely about that, about tomorrow. I just wanted to take the occasion to say, huh?
Well, the program for tomorrow, for 4th of October, after we close the session today, right after closing the session today, we will be sharing the program. And by the way, tomorrow we will have a workshop that will extend over 1 hour that will be run by IT for Change. And right after this program is finished, we will be sharing it. Again, tomorrow we will start by 4 p.m. tomorrow by Istanbul time. I also want to say something while we're all here. Shall we get a screenshot? So whoever is available, could you please turn on your cameras so that we will be able to take a group photo? On the right hand side, if you can click on gallery view, we will all be on the screen. Who's taking the photo? So let's smile. Everybody smile. Are you going to turn on your camera? So if other colleagues can turn on their cameras. Kavla, are you here? Could you please turn on your camera? And other friends from Turkey as well. So Anna already took the photo, but could you do it once again? Let's smile once again. One more smile for the camera. I'm taking the photo. One more. One more. Kenan said it's okay, so it means that it's done. So thank you once again to everybody. And by the way, who did we have with us today? We've already mentioned Celia is with us, and is Tika here? Just a second. Tika is here. Again, Wilhelmina from South Africa is here with us. Helena is here. Is Hale here? From Cyprus, I think. I could not see your name. But anyway, thank you to everybody for your participation. Tomorrow we will be here again. Take care. Bye.